Runs in the floor. I know. We're just all right. I'm over
I was
it.
just talking.
I'm gonna call it.
Good morning. Welcome to, I guess we had a short meeting in July, but this school year's first Mission Fulfillment Committee. Those of you in the audience, I'm Regent Anderson, and I guess you're stuck with me leading this committee. You know, we used to start at 8 o'clock, but then we got Regent Kenyatta on the board. We are starting, we're gonna, you know, it seems like I've been up all day already, Regent. Well, welcome, I'm glad everybody's here. I'm going to start by welcoming our student representatives to the Board of Regents. Thanks for all of you for taking on that duty this year. And at each meeting, we have two of the representatives sit around the horseshoe. Very briefly, I'm going to ask Student Representative Basarich from Duluth and Representative King from Morris. In about 30 seconds or less, Representative, would you tell us your history?
Thank you, Chair Anderson. So I am a senior at the University of Minnesota Duluth. I'm a non-traditional student, so I started out at Lake Superior College in Duluth, but I'm originally from Rochester, and I've started out as engineering, and now I'm political science, so it's quite an interesting trajectory, and just looking to really do all I can to represent the students.
Thank you. Representative King.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. My name is Brandon King. I'm a second year. I'm also a non-traditional student. I originally was teaching Taekwondo at a daycare, but then decided to come back to school. I am going for psychology, sociology, and human services, so I have a lot on my plate, but I'm excited to see what I can do for the students here.
Well, welcome and thank you for joining us here today. Again, the Mission Fulfillment Committee, I'm somewhat new to I'm real new to the leadership of it and somewhat new to the committee, although all 12 of us had worked the last 2 years together on it. I do work closely in this committee with Provost Hanson and her team and the President's office to develop the work plan for the docket. And my vice chair in this endeavor is Regent Davenport. And at this time, I'm going to ask Regent Davenport to bring us through what we're going to be doing for the year.
All right. Thank you, Chair Anderson. Hopefully you've reviewed the work plan that we have in the packet. And what I'd like to do is just draw our attention to the close alignment between this committee's work plan and the board priorities as identified at the July retreat, and along with some of the underlying conversations that we had there. So for example, today's agenda addresses program excellence, student financial education, and our outreach mission. And we have, like many of the other committees, a number of annual reports. In addition to that, the work plan supports reviewing enrollment strategies through agenda items related to transfer, post-secondary enrollment options, core general education and pipelines, as well as online education. The work plan looks at the dynamics between our university's graduates and their success and contributions to employers and to the workplace. The work plan includes a look at university rankings, and congratulations to Crookston on the announcement that came out in the U.S. report today, News and World Report. Rankings, and we also will be looking at faculty retention again as we continue to build upon our existing excellence. And one last example, while better understanding our opportunities related to diversity and inclusion, the plan includes a closer look at campus climate, not just on the Twin Cities campus, but throughout our system. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Davenport. And as you gave that report, I've looked around the table, and I think we have 11 regents here. We have good attendance, and I believe we have Regent McMillan on the phone. Is that correct, Regent McMillan?
Chair Anderson, you are correct, and delighted to be participating, although sorry I'm doing it by phone. But
all right, if you have anything to say, just speak up. Otherwise, sit back, listen, and enjoy the show.
all right, thank you.
So today we do have a busy schedule, mostly information. We're going to take these items, have a information session on them, and then there'll be time for Regents to ask questions. Our first item is going to be our annual report on academic program changes. And those that are presenting could step to the table at this time. I know it'll be Provost Hanson, Professor Griffin, Professor Knight, and Professor Whitney. And Provost Hanson, when you are ready, we are ready for you.
Thank you, Chair Anderson and members of the board. Every meeting, we bring academic program changes for the consent agenda. Today, accompanied by 3 members of our faculty, I want to talk about what lies behind these agenda items, what happens before we bring the consent agenda, the process we follow when creating, changing, and discontinuing the academic programs. First, I'll provide a short review of this process, then the required annual summary of new and changed programs, and then we'll hear from our faculty. We'll provide examples of the program development process at the faculty and department levels. Our administrative policy says this: departments, colleges, and campuses have the authority to establish, change, and discontinue academic plans and subplans that may appear on official university transcripts, subject to appropriate consultation with other units, and subject to the final authority of the Board of Regents. For the board to feel comfortable in exercising that authority through approval of the consent agenda, you undoubtedly want to know that the academic program proposals listed there have been through a process at the department, college, and campus level that's intellectually sound and academically and administratively rigorous. Regental approval takes place at the end of the process, and it's required whenever new programs are proposed and when programs are changed significantly or discontinued. Again, all of these changes and modifications or deletions come to you in the consent report. Near the end of today's meeting, Regent Anderson will invite you to vote to approve this meeting's consent report. What we're doing right now is conveying a bit about what always lies behind those reports. To set the approval process in the appropriate context, it might be helpful to remember what actually comprises a degree program. Degrees are, of course, made up of courses. Courses are also the building blocks of particular academic programs. Consider, that's what the order board is showing. Consider, for example, the 120 credit undergraduate degree on the Twin Cities campus. This weird order board illustrates the types of credits or courses a student is expected to complete for a degree. You see their collegiate requirements. Those are courses or credits that all students in a particular college are expected to take, regardless of their major or degree program. And those can vary from college to college. I mean, one example might be the second language requirement in the College of Liberal Arts. And other colleges don't have that requirement, but everyone who graduates from the College of Liberal Arts has that. Sometimes there are prerequisites to get into a college, and those may, again, differ from college to college. Liberal education, or general education, as most people call it, courses are meant to provide some disciplinary breadth and a basic level of mastery of some important skills, for example, writing. All undergraduate students on the Twin Cities campus are expected to fulfill these requirements, regardless of college or degree program. These credits very often overlap with other categories of credits, such as program requirements, and that is, students can use some courses to so-called double dip. They double count the courses, not in terms of credits, but in terms of areas. Program requirements are what most of us call a student's major or minor. And these are courses and credits in the official program of study that makes, say, a BA in math or a BA in philosophy. It's different courses for the different majors. Elective credits, the blue band there in the middle that we skipped over, are the additional credits or courses that supplement a student's major or degree program. They are free choice credits, as the name implies. So as students progress through a 120 credit degree program, and all University of Minnesota undergraduate degrees can be completed in 120 credits, and that was an effort to make that the case. They make their way through a carefully thought out configuration of courses. The work faculty do to ensure the rigor and relevance of these curricula, coupled with the choices students make to personalize their experiences, create academically responsible and intellectually stimulating degree programs. Now, the heights on those bands on the mortarboard can vary depending upon the particular program or degree. Different degree programs are configured differently, even if all have these same components. The proportion of types of credits varies. This means that there's a significant amount of variability in the flexibility that students have in their degree programs. For example, English majors may have a good deal of room to explore courses and direct some of their own study, whereas engineering students have more prescribed routes through their majors because of their accreditation requirements in the field. It's also worth noting that a given course might be used differently by different students or programs. For example, what's a collegiate requirement to many students might be an elective to some others, or an element of the major to yet others. Sometimes a course is made available only to students in a particular major, while other courses are designed to attract and serve a wide range of participants. We'll hear more in a bit from our faculty who are here today about how courses can be used in different ways. As I hope you know, we strive to follow an approval process that balances agility and oversight of academic quality. We want new programs and all curricular changes to be thoroughly vetted, but we also want departments and colleges to move through the process with ease and alacrity. First, we need to ensure alignment with mission. We don't want the business school teaching French, and the French department shouldn't be teaching marketing. Beyond that, proposed programs are evaluated in terms of some common criteria, including quality, demand, comparative advantage, adequacy, and efficient use of resources. We aim to support the process of course development and change to ensure appropriate consultation and to proceed in a timely fashion, even as proposals must go through various stages of review before formal initiation. We don't bring proposals to this committee without these steps of consultation and review across the campus and the university. We're concerned with mission fit, effective use of resources, and alignment with the priorities of the University of Minnesota. Both qualitative and quantitative data are gathered, including data from students and the broader community, as well as from faculty, in order to inform decisions about the creation and discontinuation of academic programs. The exact process is detailed in your dockets. I won't go into great detail, but as you know, it begins with faculty proposals, and then program changes are routed through the various stages of consultation. The process is collaborative and iterative, with different parts of the process examining the proposal for different things. Faculty, given their content expertise in their academic disciplines, are the generators of the new programs, based on their knowledge of developments in their academic fields, regional and national workforce needs, and student demand for certain types of knowledge and credentialing. Faculty propose new subplans, minors, certificates, and academic degree programs. Faculty are, in fact, involved throughout these various stages of the process. Proposals are reviewed, redrafted, and resubmitted in accordance with feedback from home departments, as well as collegiate curriculum committees. And then programs are open to review and feedback by peers across the institution. Staff from the colleges, as well as staff in the Office of Undergraduate Education, the Graduate School, and the Office of the Provost, work with faculty and collegiate leadership to make sure that all policies and processes are accounted for as programs find their way to the consent agenda for your consideration. So that's a reminder of the process. So now for the mandatory summary report that is required at this meeting. The programs added in 2019 include degrees such as a BS and a BA in Environmental Geosciences from CSE on the Twin Cities campus, which we'll hear more about soon, as well as an MS in Mathematics on the Duluth campus and a BA in English Communication at the Crookston campus, among others. The exact numbers of additions and deletions are in front of you now. There were also new subplans within already existing programs, along with new undergraduate minors and medical school fellowships. 2 undergraduate and 4 graduate programs were discontinued, along with a few graduate and undergraduate minors. With the changes of the past year, these are the total numbers of University of Minnesota academic programs. These numbers have remained relatively consistent over the past few years, with most numbers changing only slightly. You can see in red how the numbers compare to 5 years ago. As we've mentioned at this presentation throughout the years, the creation of a new program does not necessarily translate into new costs, nor does the discontinuation of programs directly translate into the saving of resources. This is a constant refrain of ours. I know you've heard us say it before, but it just means that faculty are deployed differently, or they have developed new courses, revised syllabi, dropped old courses. To convey more about how we handle these responsibilities for degree oversight and responsibility for refreshing and reviewing the curriculum, I've asked 3 faculty members from programs in 3 colleges to join me. I've chosen folks from these programs in part because they all have responsibilities for curriculum bearing on environmental studies. Part of the subtext here, and the reason that I asked these folks to come, is that these programs, I want to sort of show that these programs are not duplicative, even though they all have something about the environment in them. These faculty are all experts in their fields, and they can make more concrete than I the intentionality and interconnectivity of the curricular and program development processes in an area of the curriculum, studies bearing on environmental issues, where it might, at first glance, seem the university has duplication. So, you have Professor Donna Whitney from the Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences from the College of Science and Engineering, Professor Daniel Griffin, Department of Geography, Environment and Society, the College of Liberal Arts, and Professor Joseph Knight, Department of Forest Resources, College of Food, Agricultural, and Natural Resource Sciences. Thank you for being here, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Chair Anderson, members of the board, we appreciate the invitation this morning to come and talk with you about our programs. As you just heard, we represent 3 environmental programs from different colleges, CSE, CFANS, and CLA, in order from your right to left. These programs have distinct ways of approaching environmental areas of study. All are grounded in science primarily, but serve different populations of students who have different career goals. The environmental geoscience major in CSE prepares students for careers in the opportunity-rich environmental geoscience area. The ESPM program that I represent focuses on science in addition to issues surrounding environmental education, although not teacher preparation, policy issues, and natural resource management. And the CLA programs focus on the integration of humanities and science. And the Biology, Society, and Environment major in particular had its origins as CLA's biology program, but has expanded in scope to focus on contemporary environmental perspectives and skill sets. So in the following 3 slides, we're going to address 3 topics for you, and those are how our degree programs connect with and leverage the strengths of other programs, how we are attentive to our fields, our prospective fields of interest, and how we maintain the quality and appropriateness of our degree programs. And we have divided up responsibility for those 3 areas. As you'll see, pairs of us will address each. So,
Chair Anderson, members of the board, to dive into the topic, that's right. Thank you. For how we have these 3 programs that complement each other without too much overlap. We would start by just talking about how environmental studies is such an inherently interdisciplinary topic, and the complexity and severity of environmental challenges facing us all really requires a broad approach. We use this term all hands on deck, that we really need to be studying this from many different perspectives. There's no one department or program that can adequately cover this. We need scientists and engineers, we need people studying policy and management, we need humanities, we need business, we need medicine. There's pretty much, environmental studies touch many aspects of the university. And so over time, there have been programs developed to prepare our students and to explore very exciting aspects of scholarship related to environmental studies. So the University of Minnesota has developed a very broad approach, and I think this makes us a center of excellence in environmental studies. And there are many examples in which our departments and programs have connected with each other and with other system campuses, as we'll talk about, through the topic of environmental studies. There's Grand Challenges program, there's the Institute on the Environment, there's certain aspects of MnDrive, as well as our curricula. So at least from my perspective, and I think my colleagues as well, this has been a very effective approach and has led to great success for our students. We're very focused on preparing our students for careers and making sure that we're preparing them adequately for a wide range of career paths grounded in environmental studies.
Thank you.
Chair Anderson, members of the board, hello, good morning. My name is Dan Griffin. It's a privilege to be here. And so as you just heard, these degree programs offered through our departments and the different colleges in which they're found are distinct but complementary. And so, for example, I would speak to the programs in my own department, in the geography program, where we have environmental themes in our geography degrees, as well as this biology, society, and environment degree that you've just heard about. Students matriculating through our degree programs have the opportunity to be rather flexible in terms of the particular coursework that they select. If we think back to the slide we saw a moment ago with the different buckets that need to be filled, while at the same time in our establishment of the curriculum, and as we are kind of constantly reconsidering the program tracks and the recommendations that we give to the students with flexibility, we're thinking about ensuring that they have skills that will prepare them for the workforce and ensure that they're really prepared for career readiness. And I know, for example, with the students that I interact with and advise, I try to guide them towards following their interests, but also ensuring when they finish the program that they'll have an opportunity to follow multiple paths, because it's quite clear to me, even from my own time as an undeclared freshman without a major, that students don't always know at the first year what they're going to get to, where they're going to end up when they finish their time at the university. So our degrees are robust and flexible. And one of the things in geography that we insist that our students do is actually take coursework across campus. And so beyond the CLA and in fact into CSE and to CFANS. And so in particular, I've been directing students recently to pursue a sequence of coursework in statistics, because I believe that some familiarity with statistics, and if possible, if they could even do a sequence, will prepare them for hireability, frankly. And another example would be with programming. And so I think things have changed, and kids today are starting to work on coding and programming at an early age. And if they've not yet gotten to that by the time they get to college, it's not too late. And so I've directed students that I work with to pursue expertise in programming with the contemporary languages like Python and JavaScript, and things that are fairly straightforward and achievable, but also highly marketable to the workforce right out of college, right out of the undergraduate degree, and also make them more appealing as applicants to graduate school, which we know many of our undergraduates go on to pursue graduate degrees. I'd also like to highlight a particular growth sector that our department funnels into the workforce, and that's the geographic information science. And so GIS, we call it, it's basically mapping plus computers plus expert input and decision support. And so this is a pretty substantial growth sector over the last few decades, and we have a pretty deep bench in geography of faculty that specialize in GIS, but we do not cover the full gamut of geospatial applications. So, for example, we often send our students to take coursework with Professor Knight, who specializes in remote sensing of natural systems. And so this is satellite and aerial-based perspectives. And so, long story short, we are making sure that our students are well-grounded in our own degree programs, but also that they're versed and are in kind of constant contact and working on teams with students from across the university. And we believe that exposure to the hardships of teamwork makes them better prepared for the workforce.
Another way that our degree programs connect with and leverage the strength of other degree programs is through collaboration with the other campuses of the University of Minnesota system. And just from my own department in Earth and Environmental Sciences, we have very extensive connections with the department of the same name at Duluth, for example. We have, for example, we all study lakes. They study big lakes, we study little lakes. It works out. There's lots of collaboration also involving students that Duluth faculty are on our graduate faculty, so they co-advise students. They serve on our committees. We visit them as well. And in many cases, Duluth students will come and spend a semester or more in our department, in particular for PhD students. And so it's a very rich collaboration, I believe, on all levels, from through the curriculum and also involving many aspects of scholarship.
So forgive me, the mic is a little bit, it's not behaving, but, so the environment is at once a very broad field encompassing things like climate change and water resources and land use and wildlife even. It's broad and also rapidly developing. So things are constantly changing in this broad area of study that we work within. New methods are developed, new data sets are produced, new collaborations happen, and so it's a very rich area of both research and teaching. So we have to keep our fingers on the pulse of this field, so to speak. So we're always updating our curricula and our programs to account for these changes, and these changes are identified through networks of collaborators and integrating with scientists and reading and studying. And so we feel like we have a very solid understanding of these fields and can respond to that and make the curricula as robust as possible to help the students work in these areas. So in another way, our stakeholders, the people that we do research for and work with, and our collaborators are often the ultimate employers of our students. So we might receive a project funded by the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources and have close relationships with people at the DNR. And then ultimately some of the students that we graduate could work for DNR. It's just one example of many possible where there's a direct relationship between the people that we collaborate with and the ultimate employers of our students.
So in our conversations and preparing for this meeting, we discussed about how our various departments and the advisors in our departments work with employment data for both the state and national level to try to maintain our finger on the pulse of where the opportunities are and how students can move forward. And so there's a footnote here with some of the examples of the data sets that we use. I'd also, to turn back to the geographic information science example, I'd highlight an anecdote from our Masters in GIS program orientation just from a couple of weeks ago. So this is one of the nation's longest professional master's degrees in GI science, and it's been quite productive, and the placement rate is phenomenal, and the recruitment rate is really strong. And so one of the things that my colleague Mark Lindberg, who's on that faculty, highlighted was that over this multi-decadal history of GIS, the game has changed a bit. For a long time, it was such that students could come in and learn how to drive this complicated software and then go out and get jobs and, in fact, roll those jobs into lifelong careers. And that's certainly still the case. The software is complicated, but it's becoming more intuitive, and they've improved the usability, and it now doesn't necessarily take a master's degree to just drive the software. And so the opportunities have shifted away from that and have moved into what really requires a broader perspective, such that students can have a more holistic understanding that's needed for planning and directing projects to go on and inform decision support. Of course, GIS is really at the vanguard of wrangling with big data and managing big data sets, and so students have to learn how to deal with that. And along the way, now students really have to become somewhat expert with coding, and Python is a language that's been really common for that. Another point, I guess I would just echo what Professor Knights just said, is that the longevity of this particular program has produced graduates that are now in middle and upper management in across sectors, in government, municipal, state, federal, and then also in the private sector and the nonprofit sectors as well. And so graduates of our program are effectively now embedded in the workforce, and this ensures, we're in communication with them, and these also establish really critical pipelines for placing the next generation of students. And then finally, in our own department, we've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to hire a few new faculty in GIS over the last few years, and we've been particularly attentive to trying to understand what's the real bleeding edge of this technology, and what problems need to be solved, and where can we find the best talent. And let's get those people in to train the next generation. So we've been really strategic with regard to hiring and identifying faculty that are best suited to preparing the next generation.
So in CFANS, our Career and Internship Services group collects extensive data through surveys of our graduates. They ask questions about what is your job? Is the job related to the program that you studied while you were here? How satisfied are you with that position? What is the salary? All of that data is available to anyone on the web. We frequently use it when we talk with prospective parents, prospective students' parents rather, so we can show them the data on how satisfied our graduates are with the programs that they have completed. But we also use it, of course, for development of our academic programs. So if we find, for example, that a particular area is identified as a growth area, we have a lot of people that end up in positions like that, we can strengthen those areas. Or the reverse would be if we find that a program is not meeting the needs of the employers or the students, we can cut that. And an example of that in ESPM, a couple of years ago, we removed one of our areas of emphasis from the major in response to those concerns. We identified a concern that we weren't meeting the needs of the students, and so we cut that track and focused our efforts in other areas. And then we're always updating things. As I said, the environment is moving very quickly. Not only the methods that researchers use, but the tools that people who work in that area need to use change frequently. Dan mentioned statistics and programming. We think those are very important, and we're always adding emphasis areas to better equip our students to succeed in these careers.
I'll combine the last 2 points on this slide with an example from the Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences. We just added a new program with your approval last year in environmental geoscience. And the reason we did this, we had a track for students to take, informally a list of courses they could take in environmental geoscience. And we also had a minor. But through talking to our advisory board and talking to employers and with the change in our faculty of more emphasis and scholarship on environmental sciences, we just felt that we weren't adequately preparing our students for a direct path to careers, that they were getting a very great education with an earth science degree, but there were other courses that were kind of electives for that degree that we felt should be required for students who wanted a particular career path. And so the environmental geoscience majors don't add, as Provost Hansen said, cost in a sense. They're a redistribution of our focus in a way that students take particular courses and have particular experiences, and we can do a better job of making sure that when they graduate that they have what they need to go into the opportunity-rich fields of environmental geosciences. So we get a lot of feedback from external sources, from employers, from our field, and we spent a lot of time crafting this plan before we went ahead and proposed it and got valuable feedback from our colleagues in other programs as well as at the college and provost's office before it came to you. So we're just starting it this fall, and there's been a huge interest in it already, and we're very optimistic that this will be a great thing for our students. So we thank you for your approval. And that's the end of our presentation, but we're happy to take questions.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And you know, one of the things we're trying to do here is show we have environmental sciences in all these colleges, how they are somewhat different, but yet you work somewhat together to make sure our students can get all the need they have. Part of being the chairman is you get to ask your questions first before we run out of time, and I did have a couple questions. I heard Professor Knight mention, you know, the differences you people do. Yet he said something to the opinion, or something to the point that we don't do teacher prep. So I mean, and I'm guessing for high school teachers and teachers of environmental science, my question is, do we in the College of Education and Human Development, do we also have environmental people, or do teachers that come out of there with, that need those classes, take them from your colleges?
I'm not aware of a specific environment-focused teaching program in CEHD.
Okay.
What I meant by that comment was that we would provide the environmental expertise, and then if the student desired to become a teacher, they would get the teaching expertise in a different program.
Terrific. Okay, that's kind of what I was thinking. And the other thing, I heard both Professor Whitney and Professor Griffin talk a little to this point. Professor Whitney on her last deal with environmental geosciences to understand where we're going in the future and talking on what, having the right programs. And then Professor Griffin talked about GIS, and it made me think of driverless cars, you know, today with mapping the highways and things like that. And so, and there was also a comment of we need to have our finger on the pulse of where we're going in the future. And my question is, so we go when you think of GIS. Back when I was probably in school or a little before, we'd never heard of it. It was, you know, in the space program. Then it was something that was way out there. Now it's here. So how do we, in looking to what we're going to offer as degrees or what we're going to teach, how do we have our finger on the pulse from way out there, or from never heard of, way out there to it's here? And how do we stay above that curve or ahead of that curve so that we can get those students in? Does anybody have a question or an answer on that?
So I can take a stab at it. So I remember as a college student, when I took my first GIS class, McDonald's was used as an example. Apparently McDonald's was an early
Doctor?
use of, you know, they were really cautious about where they cited their franchise locations. And so that's an assimilation of geographic data, of population data, of traffic data, visibility, all these kinds of things that are still relevant today. Indeed, things have come a long way. And in fact, I am a little worried about the driverless car situation personally, because I don't know that much about it, but I don't want a computer deciding who crashes harder personally. That's just, maybe I'm a Luddite and concerned. I will say that one of my newer colleagues in our department, Eric Shook, is really a computer scientist. And he specializes in what he calls computational GIS. And so this is really maximizing the computational efficiency of GIS processing. And so again, the details are a little bit lost on me, but by taking these computations and organizing them for parallel processing, you can distribute the work across multiple computer cores, and it's faster and more efficient. And so since he's arrived, he's begun to offer classes in what he calls this cyber GIS. And so a few of the students that I work closely with have taken those classes. And it's one of the things that's nice from that coursework is they have hands-on work with Python. You know, that's the language that he works in. And whether they go on to employ his particular approach, they'll have had to problem solve with Python. In my own research lab, I would just mention that we're trying to also, I'm trying to bring together students not just from my college and department, but I'm also working with students from engineering, computer engineering, and we're trying to bring some artificial intelligence to bear on the work that I do. And so by bringing these teams together, you kind of broaden perspectives and give kids a real shot at problem solving.
And I think we just want to make sure that we, like you said, keep our finger on the pulse and we're ahead of the curve, and so we can get these students.
If I
Anything
can
to add?
Just one point very quickly. I'd like to add that in many cases, the pipeline of those new methods that are used in the corporate world, such as the companies that are working, or many companies that are working on driverless cars, starts at universities. So the processing that's done in some cases for driverless cars relies on technique called a neural network. There are people in the computer science department here today working on those things. So I think we're not only monitoring what's going on, we're involved, faculty in general, in the very early stages of development of those techniques.
My colleagues, do I have questions from my colleagues? Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, presenters. My question is just, it sounds like you're collecting a lot of data about your programs, and I was just wondering if you could share with us the average starting salaries of graduates from each of your programs.
Oh, it's quite variable, actually. If it's in more of these computation-based or a connection, say, with engineering, they're very high. But we also place students in nonprofit organizations or various educational institutions. So, I mean, it varies from, say, $40,000 to $100 and something thousand. It's huge range.
Thank you. Thank you. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, presenters. You probably couldn't have picked a better topic to talk about interdisciplinary work and collaboration as an employer. I'm just astounded by the interest in the environment, and sometimes I feel, though, that graduates come out with without there's passion gets ahead of the science in terms of there's not an appreciation for the complexity of the science that you're dealing with every day and the solutions. So for those that go through the policy side of the environment, are they given enough introduction to the science so that they'll leave with a respect for the work that you do on the science side? Sometimes feel like it's a little bit. There's little ships passing in the night here between liberal arts majors on interest in science and the work that you're doing on the bench and in the lab and in the field.
So there's an answer out there, Professor Knight.
I can speak to my program's involvement in those areas. So in ESPM, we have a policy track. It's called Policy Planning, Law, and Society. And students in that track are required to take several core science courses. In addition to the normal university type things that everybody takes, they're required to dive in deeper into science specifically before they're allowed to graduate. So given that it's a policy or law-focused track, I think we do a pretty good job of preparing them with science to go along with that.
Thank you, sir. Regent Hsu, I cut you off before, and then if you'd go ahead, I didn't know you had a follow-up. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was actually looking for 3 different answers for each of the programs.
Chair Anderson, Regent Hsu, I would have to look deeper and speak with our advisors to obtain the range of salaries that our students go on to achieve right out of school. But I would highlight that each of our departments also has a number of graduate degrees, and so there is, I think that there's quite a wide range depending on the level of experience gained. But I'd be happy to look into that and provide those numbers later.
Thank you.
Professor Knight?
And for ESPM, we have that data on the web, and I'd be happy to point you to it. I've seen salaries ranging from 35 to 40 to 70 to 80. It really just depends. As I said, initially the field is so broad that students can do almost anything from working at a nonprofit where maybe the salaries aren't that high to working with engineers in an environmental engineering context. So hugely variable salaries.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Regent Hsu. Regent Powell.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Provost Hanson and presenters. I mean, to me, it's a really vivid sort of example of how in a very fast-moving area of inquiry. I mean, we got to move fast to keep our program relevant. We need to be agile because things change pretty rapidly. So I'm just, I heard the comment that student demand is an important signal that helps us determine whether we should be adding programs or eliminating them. But as I heard the discussion, what I'm taking away is that that's a factor, but really the driver is your view of where the area is going, and you do try, to Chair Anderson's point, stay ahead of the curve, and you make predictions about which areas of study really are going to decline and what the coming thing is, and that drives where we add and where we take away. And so, I mean, I want to just make sure I've interpreting, getting this, or is it really more driven by the numbers and by the student demand?
Provost Hanson, you want to take a stab at that
Regent
question?
Anderson, yeah, and Regent Powell. It's driven by both. I mean, I was eager to jump in on the issue of sort of how the students are prepared for the areas that are at the, as you said, the bleeding edge. It's because they have research faculty teaching them. It's because the faculty are doing research and they are at the bleeding edge. And so their knowledge of the field drives the changes that they make in programs, but it's also true that at various times, because of forces that are sort of outside of the university itself or these particular disciplines, there are market changes. And if students stop taking something, even if we have, faculty who are really expert in that, we stop offering it. So it's both together. But I really want to emphasize that part. It's the fact that we have these research faculty that we are, in some sense ahead of the curve. It makes the programs at the University of Minnesota distinctively valuable to this state.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Regent Her.
Yes, thank you, Provost Hanson and faculty. My question goes to what Chairman Powell just asked, and that is the aha moment. And so I love that we have the macro, and then we're bringing it to the micro, where you are the faculty, you are deciding what to add, what to drop. So I want to understand a little bit, because I know that during the process, we, as the Board of Regents, provides approval at the end, but I want to know at the beginning, what is the aha moment of this is, we need to drop this, is there a trigger, what goes into the thinking, and at the department faculty level, is there enough support or insight to be nimble, to balance creativity and innovation versus what is core and what we have to keep. And so wanting to understand a little bit more about, as you think about the future, what to keep, what to drop. Are we at that sweet spot in terms of majoring that we're offering within a certain school, within a certain department? What do we need to add? That type of thinking at the faculty level.
Yeah, and
Professor Whitney?
Yes, Chair Anderson, Regent Her, that's the question, right? We are always evaluating and are trying to figure out, are we in the right place? And for us, our new program proposal, it took quite a long time to decide this is what we need to do. We thought, can we do it with our existing program, with just getting students into this track better, with better advising? And we just kept hearing from our newer faculty, from our students, from our advisory board, no, I think a major program is the right thing to make sure that those students get there. And we wanted to make sure, too, that we were, this balance between the discovery and the scholarship was very well integrated with, career preparation. And so getting that right, it took quite a while and a lot of consultation. And maybe we don't have it quite right yet. We're going to examine our results, how are our students doing, what kind of career success do they have, are there new courses that they need. We're requiring them to take courses in soil science and CFANS and GIS, which we haven't required of our traditional earth science students. Are those the right courses? Is there something else they need? It's a continuous process.
Thank you. Regent Myron.
When I was looking at the materials that was provided in anticipation of this report and looking at what you all look for demand and development of a new program, I do see that one of the areas that you will apparently seek out information is from employers. and in terms of what it is they either need or foresee in the future. And as we keep hearing about, keep predicting a significant workforce shortage here in Minnesota, that we're not going to have enough people adequately trained for jobs that I'm not sure employers exactly know what they're going to need in the next 5 to 10 years. So how does, either specifically or generally, how do we go about determining what are the workforce needs? What's going to be needed out there from our current or future employers here in the state or nationwide or worldwide to make sure that we're offering a program that will ultimately train people to meet those needs?
I could provide, I guess, an anecdote from ESPM. When we consider whether to add a new subplan within the major, that comes from faculty initially. Someone has to organize a group of faculty to support this thing and to write a proposal, and the proposal has to demonstrate that there is student demand for this area of study, that there's employer demand for that area of study, and that there are jobs available now, and then providing data about what the salaries and placement rates of those jobs are. So it's very much a quantitative response to an idea. We have to justify that this makes sense to add to the program. Did that get at your?
So as a follow-up then, is it up to the faculty person who's proposing this, for example, an addition of a program or a sub-program, to go out into the workplace to interview or survey potential employers to see what it is they need or what it is they're lacking or what it is they foresee they're going to need in the future to make sure that the program is aligning with those needs? Who's responsible for doing that?
It's up to the proposing faculty, and it relates to the point I made earlier about how the people that we work with, the people who fund our research and the people that we do our research with, are often the employers of our graduates. So we have very strong relationships with those people. So it doesn't have to be a formal survey or potentially very expensive survey. We know those people and we can ask those questions directly.
That's interesting, thank you. We've got a couple more regents, and then to stay on schedule, we're going to cut it off there because today is just information, not action. Regent Simonson.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. I really liked what I heard about the collaboration on this topic across colleges. As you are well aware, animal, poultry, health are big industries in our state here, and environmental issues are constant problems in that area. I wonder if there's any collaboration, like with the veterinary college, because that's my field, and I really, dealing with environmental issues is a big issue. And I think people coming out with an undergraduate degree to help address some of these things, there would be opportunity.
Any comment, either of you, Regent Griffin or Professor Griffin? I just almost gave you a promotion.
Chair Anderson and Regent Simonson, I can't comment on direct collaboration between our program and your alma mater, but I would say that, for example, we do have these large enrollment classes that touch on environmental themes, and so this semester I'm teaching our departments. I've got 330 students from across the Twin Cities campus, and I was looking at the profile of the student body for the class, and I do believe we have some veterinary science students there. And, I know, for example, one of the things that we talk about in that class is the Green Revolution and how transformative the Haber-Bosch process was to developing fertilizer. I mean, synthesis of ammonia has been transformative for the global society, and that has a rich history here at the University of Minnesota, of course. But there were some unintended consequences. And so I know in my home state of Arkansas, where animal and poultry practices are really important, we've had a lot of troubles with water quality tied to animal waste and so on and so forth. And so I know students are getting some, at least broad perspective on how these, revolutionary technological solutions don't always play out without some unintended consequences.
Thank you. Okay, Regent Kenyatta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Presenters, thank you for taking the time and sharing this with us. I think my question is more for the provost. I was wondering how the university then responds after the fact in terms of aligning resources and driving them to where they're needed. So for example, if a college, one college is identified, they no longer need to offer a certain program, whether it's due to student demand, university priorities, or what the workforce is asking for, and at the same time, another college has added a program. We still have faculty in this college trained to teach this, and we don't have them in the other ones. So how do we then get those resources, whether financial or human resources, moved around?
Provost Hanson.
Chair Anderson and Regent Kenyon, if there is student demand, it would actually be realized in the department that's already offering it. If indeed it's something else that's of a slightly different flavor that, is being grown up in a different area and students are migrating to that. There are other ways. I mean, what happens in the department that has lost enrollment in a program is that those faculty are often redeployed into other areas of their expertise, or they reconfigure their degree programs or offer minors, or they cooperate in various ways with an area, a slightly different flavored thing that's growing up elsewhere. I mean, it's one of the reasons that we want to stress the dynamism of both the faculty careers, where that's, again, because the faculty are doing research and know where fields are going, that they're able to stay one step ahead of what the students should be learning when they are going to be going out into those fields. And so it's a complicated, interconnected dance between, the student interests at various times and the training the faculty have had, but the continuing development that faculty have because they are also researchers. So it's not just that we allow a program to grow up in one school or college or department that's so like another one that's just dying down. It wouldn't happen that way because of the character of the consultation that we do in developing these. We don't allow duplicative programs.
Thank you. And Regent Powell, you're going to bring us home with the last question.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. Very quick follow-up on Regent Mayron's question in that exchange. You mentioned you have a number of significant corporate research partners. Can you tell us who a few of those are?
It's my role as department head. I formed an advisory board 3 years ago that specifically was from regional professionals with the very focused task of advising us if we're doing the right thing for our career preparedness for students for non-academic careers. And so I invited, and people very generously have volunteered their time from Braun Intertech and Bar Engineering and a range of smaller geotechnical firms, as well as government and nonprofits.
Thank you.
Regent Powell, just so you know, there's probably room for other corporate entities to donate to those resources too, just so you know that. I just want to say this has been a really interesting and enlightening program. We got a little into the environmental science, although it was a program on how we do program changes. So I think today when we get to the consent agenda, just know that the program changes that we have on there from the Provost's office have been well vetted. I think that was proven today. So unless you people have anything to comment on, I want to thank you for being here today and thank you for your service to the University of Minnesota. Thank you. As soon as we are ready, we are going to go to our next item, which is addressing affordability, supporting student financing and education. And again, this is a discussion information item today. There's no votes. I know we're going to have Vice Provost McMaster. I haven't seen him yet, but he's probably here somewhere. And Director Tina Faulkner of Student Office of Student Finance. And when they're ready, we're going to let them go. Go ahead. Student, financial literacy has been a big push of mine. I think we need to do what we can for the students here, and we're going to get a little report on that today. So, Vice Provost McMaster, Director Faulkner, are you ready?
I believe we are.
Whenever, the floor is yours.
Good. Chair Anderson, members of the committee, we're glad to be back here today for a round two discussion of this topic.
I'm going to have to admit that I wish I was in the last presentation rather than this one, all about geography, but I'll try to do the best I can here. I wanted to thank, first of all, John Bursick-Dreyer. He's our financial aid analyst, and he does terrific work for us in preparing a lot of the data and the analysis that you're looking at today. So what we'll do is start with the national landscape, kind of look at where we sit as a state compared to others, and I think you're well aware that we have tended to be a high debt state. This graph shows that. We're in the upper decile of student debt. We've been even higher than that in terms of the ranking, so the good news is we've slipped a bit. Most of the very high debt states are on the East Coast. We'll see a map shortly that depicts that. Interesting, given its size and relatively low debt compared to others, the University of Minnesota actually brings the state average down because of our size in terms of debt. So we need to keep that in mind. The other fact that I think is interesting is that, again, as a campus, the Twin Cities campus in this ranking, which you can't do that, put an institution in a state ranking, but I'll do it anyway, would come out 36 in terms of that list. So to the map and to the inappropriately placed, as usual, Alaska and Hawaii, what you're looking at is the national distribution of debt. And I don't think this really surprises anybody in terms of what you're seeing. You see a gradient that goes down from the East Coast with a very high percentage of private education, private institutions to the West Coast. You also, with a high percentage of public education. You also see a few anomalies here in terms of the spatial distribution. One, of course, is our own state, Minnesota, which stands out a bit in terms of the upper Middle West with an average debt for all students, all institutions at around $32,000. You see some other interesting anomalies here, Alabama in the South. You see Oregon with low debt in the West. So it's not a perfect gradient, but basically that's the general trend. In terms of the way we think about affordability in the Provost's office and the Office of Undergraduate Education, we wanted to frame this in three major parts. One is student success, and we think we've made some significant progress around timely graduation. But in addition to that, we also have made significant investments around student success with advising, tutoring, career counseling, improving our classrooms. It's a long story here, and you've heard bits and pieces of this before, but it all adds up to timely graduation. Another piece of this would be controlling costs. So keeping tuition increases at a reasonable rate. We'll talk about that in a moment. And of course, a absolutely critical piece of this would be increasing scholarships and other gift aid. We're thinking constantly about what are the next steps here, and we're always anxious to hear from the board and senior administrators about their views on next steps, but we certainly want to continue our focus on financial literacy. You're going to see a big step forward in that direction later on today, and controlling the educational costs. An example here are books. Our bookstore has a whole series of initiatives to try to control the cost of textbooks, rental books, e-books, and other mechanisms to make sure students don't have to overspend in that category. We certainly want to continue our focus on increasing scholarship support, especially for our lowest income students. We want to continue our improvements in retention graduation rates, in particular for under-resourced students. We're doing very well with our graduation rates. We won't get into a deep dive on that topic today, but they are somewhat lumpy and inconsistent, and so we want to be mindful of that. So those are the three major areas we'll talk about, and we'll talk about student success first. Within our enrollment management plan, these are some of the key initiatives that are underway. I obviously won't do a deep dive into all these. I'll mention a few. One is around our retention efforts, and something that I'll mention is called the Levers study. When we find out in the spring and over the summer that a student has not registered for the fall, we get on them as fast as we can. We badger them. I'm sorry, that's a bad word. We needle them, we nudge them throughout the summer with emails and phone calls to find out what happened, why they didn't register. And in fact, that's really changed the picture in terms of the number of students who we can get to return the following fall. Another would be around transfer student experiences, where we put tremendous effort into transfer orientation, transfer housing, the transfer curriculum, transfer pathways, and in fact, I think in October there's another conversation around some of those pathways. So suffice it to say, we have a whole series of initiatives to continue the work around student success. One of the major impacts of this work has been the improvement in our four-year graduation rate. These are Twin Cities data that you're looking at here, but the number that we like to point out is the increase from the early 1990s of around a 15%, an embarrassing 15% four-year graduation rate, to approximately 71% today. And we want to continue to improve those rates over the next few years as well. We also, in terms of controlling costs, talk about a resident tuition. And I think this graph is a good story for this board and for this university, that there have been very minimal resident tuition increases over the last half decade. So thanks to the board for doing this, because this has significantly helped our ability to control the costs of undergraduate education. But the flip side of this is really increasing scholarship support. And the next graph really tells it all. In many ways, we could stop here and go home today, at least we could, because this shows the four basic curves that lead to controlling costs. So let's spend just a moment on this. The one curve at the bottom that I'll mention is the relatively flat enrollment growth. Now, enrollment growth is going up slightly. We'll hear more about this fall's enrollment in the next few weeks as we hit our census date. But basically, there hasn't been a significant increase there. What we see here is the tuition going up 191% over this period, the last 20 years. But more importantly, the gift aid going up at twice that rate, at around 400%. So I think that's the ratio that becomes important in affordability. Yes, tuition's gone up, but the university has redoubled its efforts to make sure that we're backfilling that plus with lots of gift aid. And we'll see a richer picture about that in the next few minutes. There's some lumps and bumps here that I won't get into unless you want me to. In the middle of the scholarship grant curve that deal with this federal stimulus money that came into the university and was counted in different ways over a period of time, and that causes the perturbations in the curve. This is the chart that is the model for our financial aid picture, and this is one where we've added together both our gift aid data and our loan data over about a 10-year period. The first graph you see is for the system. So this represents the entire system, and the gift aid categories, which you know well, university scholarships, Pell, state grant, and so on. And then the different kinds of loans, federal loans, state and university loans, private, and then the Parent Plus categories. One of the new pieces of the relationship that we saw from putting these together is the ratio between gift aid and loans. And what we see for the system is that 10 years ago, that ratio was 200 million to 230, and that ratio has closed now to 245 to 249. I think that's an interesting way of looking at gift aid to borrowing. And the next slide, identical data, but just for the Twin Cities, shows that same kind of relationship of a closing of the gap between gift aid and loans to the point now where on the Twin Cities campus, we provide $175 million in gift aid, and the total loans would be $170. I will point out a troubling trend here in these data, and that's the increase in the Parent Plus loan category. And we've seen over the last few years that bump up fairly quickly, and we're not completely certain why, but we're figuring it out. The next slide shows some of the disaggregated data for gift aid across geography. The NR number that you see here, and one of the reasons that it is higher is that includes the waivers that are used to maintain enrollment in that category. We give relatively little aid to reciprocity students, so that's why that piece of the curve where that bar is low. And within each one of those bars, the number in parentheses at the bottom shows the percent who receive gift aid within that category. So 85% of students from Greater Minnesota receive some type of gift aid. Only 51% of reciprocity students receive any form of gift aid. Same set of bars, except this time we shift to the colleges. And you can see the college distribution of gift aid, which varies fairly significantly. CEHD is at the high end because there's a high percentage of low-income Pell students, first-generation students, who are receiving significant amounts of Pell Grant funding and state grant funding and U of M Promise funding. At the low end, College of Design is in that position because they have a very high percentage of reciprocity students who don't receive much gift aid from the U. And so there's a story in some ways behind each one of those collegiate numbers. This chart, which we compute every few years because it's a very labor-intensive process, tries to tease out the difference between need-based aid and non-need-based aid in what we distribute from the university. So to cut to the chase here, as we look at the ratio, and we look at this ratio every few years to make sure we're maintaining a balance that we think is appropriate. At this moment, it's around 60-40. 60% of all the gift aid goes for what we would call need, and about 40%, which mostly involves scholarships, merit scholarships, goes into that category. I will note also here that a new category that's grown over the last few years because of work in the Provost office and the foundation is around middle income. Middle income is a huge need for our students now. We've updated this slide, which we show you each year, which really gets into the model behind our, the strategy behind our packaging for different AGIs, adjusted gross incomes. So the number that you want to focus on here is the red line, which shows the 4 AGIs for families from 25,000 up to 120,000. Why do we go to 120,000? Because of our U of M Promise program that goes up to 120 AGI. As we look down the first column, what we I think the very positive story here is that between the gift aid, which includes Pell, state grant, U of M Promise, the SEOG grant from the federal government, along with work study, students are offered nearly $20,000 in gift aid. So we do heavily package our zero EFC students, expected family contribution, with the maximum amount of gift aid we can. However, you see that those students are also offered loans. Now, these students may also receive merit-based aid. That's not included in here. This is just a distribution of our need-based gift aid. And you can see as you shift across the AGI levels to the right, the amount of gift aid drops off precipitously. So a family who is making $100,000 a year, theoretically, if there are no scholarships on the table, would be offered $5,500 in student loans. That's the max out with the federal government, and almost $20,000 in parent.
So this set of data has two sets of information. The striped bar is for families that are earning $75,000 or less, and the solid bar is for families that are making $110,000 or less. And the exciting part about this is exactly where we want to be as a system. All of the University of Minnesota campuses are at the low end of this, and even when we consider some of the private schools that have very different discounting strategies than we do.
We think this is one of the critical pieces of information for the board to see, and that is the effect of our four-year graduation rate. So these are estimates, these aren't exact numbers, but our estimates show that because of increasing our graduation rate over this period, and these are the cohorts that go from 2005 to 2014, about a 10-year period, from 47 to 71%, we've been able to save students in borrowing around $20 million. The other piece of this to note is that as students delay graduation from 4 years to 6 years, the percent who borrow go up 10%, which is significant, and the amount that they have to borrow goes up $8,500. So that's significant. The number here we have is that this work around pushing four-year graduation has enabled as many as 6,900 students to finish in 4 years who probably would not have without the efforts by the university. This table, which you've seen before, and we crammed a lot of data on this table, we know shows for both the Twin Cities and the system the number of graduates over time, the percent who graduated with no debt climbing to 40%, and then the average student debt, which has been decreasing now over time. I think you've seen the numbers. And I wanted to comment on this because we often talk about this 40%. First of all, why do we report it this way, students who borrow? Because that's the IPEDS number. The number that we have to report to the federal government is for students who borrow. The real number here, which is a real average if you included all students, not just those who borrow, would be somewhere around $16,000, not the $25,000 or $26,000 you see here. Several years ago, we actually did a study where we looked at the indebtedness for students who left the university without a degree. This was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And interestingly, there was not a significant difference between the indebtedness for those who finished with a degree and those who didn't, aside from the fact they didn't have a degree to rely on when they were done. And so that undoubtedly had a major impact on their future earnings. I think an interesting study related to this would be to look at moving forward the indebtedness for those who graduate, the indebtedness for those who leave the university and go to another institution, which we can get now from the National Clearinghouse data, and then those who we think haven't finished at all. So somebody needs to do that.
Take it on.
Okay. The next slide is one that shows the average the average indebtedness for the state of Minnesota. And as with the other curve around net cost, you can see that our campuses are in fact below and often well below the average for the state of Minnesota. So again, I think this shows that the policies that have been put in place are at least in part working for our students. Next slide is that for the Big Ten. And so we lie at the lower end of the Big Ten. A few comments here on those institutions who have lower debt. Nebraska has very low tuition compared to the rest of the Big Ten. Michigan has a boatload of endowment and gift aid. And Illinois has a high percentage of resident students and other complications we can get into in terms of why they're low. What's interesting here, and I'm always, I don't want to say stunned, but pretty surprised when I see this number, is at Penn State, the average indebtedness is $38,000 a year. They also have incredibly high tuition compared to the rest of the Big Ten. And then to kind of finish up on the data and controlling costs, what we see here is the average loan debt by college. So we can match that up with the gift aid by college. At the low end, these are undergraduate students. Is the medical school. That would be the mortuary science program with low debt. At the high end of this, we have dental hygiene, where the students often have to go full year programs, including summer programs that drives up the indebtedness for those students. And then you can see the gradient across the rest of the colleges. So that's the picture we wanted to paint in terms of where we sit with our gift aid, borrowing, loans. We want to shift now into financial literacy, where there's a new initiative that I think is pretty impressive that we thought you'd want to see.
Yes, I'm going to talk just a bit before I go into the video that we're hoping will work. But the financial literacy and debt awareness, I really appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk with you all about this. This is something that's very near and dear to our house or our hearts in the Office of Student Finance, as well as in the Office of Undergraduate Education and through all of the campuses. We know that our students need to know how to manage their money, and that's not to say that they don't know how to, but we know that many of them don't come with that skill set. And so to that end, each of our campuses address financial literacy a little differently, and it depends sometimes on expertise and resources, as well as availability of people who are well-versed in what we want to address. And on the Twin Cities campus, the One Stop Student Services is our focal point for our financial literacy efforts, and we've been doing this for approximately 15 years. What started out as a very small sort of tips and tricks for managing your money has evolved over 15 years into what you can see in the four sort of pillars that are depicted on the picture. There are financial wellness appointments that are one-on-one appointments with students that they set up with a one-stop counselor who has been trained in financial wellness counseling, and this is student-driven. It is not hypothetical. A one-stop counselor will look at a student's, could be their financial aid package, it could be their indebtedness, it could be if someone brings them a budget. They will work with the student on what topic they want to know about, and students can come back for more than one of them, and these have been very well received by our students. We introduced the concept of financial literacy and financial wellness and awareness to our incoming students during Welcome Week. We have a very, if you've never seen it, we have a very entertaining and interactive presentation that is part of Welcome Week. And as an extra incentive this year, if students attended that, they could put their name in a drawing for a $500 scholarship. We had 6 of them that will be applied spring semester. And we also follow that up with, during this fall semester, there is a series of workshops that is targeted at our incoming students that range from budgeting to planning for your sophomore year. And again, as an added incentive for students to participate in these, they can put their name in a drawing for each one of the workshop series that they go to for a $1,000 scholarship that will be applied fall semester of the next year as a retention effort. And I have a quote here from a student. We let them know in June if their name was selected, and this student said, "This award has made a huge impact on how I'm able to pay for college this year. It saved me from taking a loan out for this fall semester." And we have a few other ones like that that are, I believe, in your docket. So our first year students are introduced to it then, and as our students are graduating, our one-stop counselors are also available during what's called Grad Fest, which is where people can get their caps and gowns and announcements and learn about exit interviews. And they're there to talk with our graduating seniors about budgeting and planning for your financial future as you move out of being a student. So we're there from the beginning to the end and all times in between. So now I am going to hopefully make the presentation work the way it is supposed to. You all can talk about something while I do this. All right, Skeeter, where'd it go? There we go. Escape. So what we have here is, I want this to go back a touch. I was going to do a live demo, but we all decided that that was a bad idea. They never work. So what we have here is a created video of a recreated, re-envisioned My Finances tab in the MyU portal. And before I go into the details of this, it's really important that I say the creation of what you see was a collaborative effort of portions of the Office of Undergraduate Education, all members of the Student Finance, Financial Aid, and some of the record side of all of our campuses, as well as the MyU portal team, which is part of institutional analysis, and the Office of Information Technology. It took lots of us to figure out how to make this work within the technology we had, as well as to think outside the box of presenting things that you'll find as I show you. We would normally just push stuff out in an email. So I am now going to walk you through this, and this is, are you all familiar with what MyU is? Yes. We think of it as the electronic doorway. The MyU portal. It is our electronic doorway for our students to conduct their business of being a student. It's where they go to register for classes, to check their class schedule, to interact with their financial aid, to pay their bill. So this is, our students are very familiar with this. And if you want a couple of stats, for the week of August 26th through September 5th, there were 169,000 total users for a total of 1,353,780 sessions, resulting in 2,939,549 page views. So as you can see, it gets a lot of activity. So in the My Finances tab, it starts out with billing and payment. And I'm going to pause it periodically so I can talk a little bit about what you're seeing. The two boxes that you can see, and it's probably a little blurry for you in the audience, I apologize. The pinkish red box is a call to action for our students to either enroll in the Boynton Health Service medical benefit or to waive it. If students don't waive this, they are auto-enrolled, and that is a charge of $1,116 a semester. Inevitably, we have lots of students who think they've waived it and they haven't, and before we put it in front of them right here, they would get an email, and then they would have to think, well, did I click on that? Did I not? And this takes them directly, the eligible students link takes them directly to the Boynton place where they can waive or enroll in the service. Since we launched, this part we launched in January of 2019, and from the time we launched it in January of 2019 to the middle of February, we had a 15% increase in students that waived this coverage that resulted in about a $600,000 savings for our students because they did not need the coverage. We can't give you the stats for fall yet because students have until the 26th of September to do it, but I anticipate it will be very similar to what we saw in January. The yellow box that you see under the red box is for students that appear based on what we have as their home location in our student information system, that they appear to be from a reciprocity state. That is their call to action to fill out the paperwork to be eligible for in-state tuition. Students are not automatically eligible unless they fill out the reciprocity paperwork. And we have many students who don't remember to do this. Again, they get an email from admissions, they will get an email from our office, but the emails, probably like most of us, get cluttered in their email box. Putting it front and center and color coding it brings it to their attention. Since we launched this revised version of My Finances from the middle of June until now, When we launched it in the middle of June on the Twin Cities campus, we had about 830 students who had this message presented to them. As of last week, over 500 of them had taken care of their reciprocity paperwork. That saves those students about, it's an average because we've got different rates depending on when students entered, saves them an average of about $15,000 a year. For our standpoint and from a one-stop standpoint, that is a marvelous customer service perspective. It allows our students to, they don't have to call us and say, why does my bill appear to be wrong? Or realize it a couple years later when it's too late for us to have them fill out the paperwork for that year. So that is a big boon for our students. Here's where they would make a payment and update their direct deposit. So next we're going to go to the next tab, which is the financial aid tab. I'm going to stop here for a moment. The green box up at the top is there front and center for a very important reason. This is called satisfactory academic progress. We have to calculate this each year from the federal government or from the Department of Ed that says students are making progress towards their degree based on a few different things. It is cumulative GPA, are you completing the courses that you are enrolled in, as well as are you completing your degree within what's called a maximum time frame. Students have 150% of a program length, so it's 180 credits. This used to come to them again in an email. Now it is here. What students can also do is they click on this box, they are able to see how we calculate their satisfactory academic progress, as well as what are their exact specifics of their case. Next, students will do something that we've had for years, which is called financial aid steps. They'll select their aid year, and what you're going to see here in this stepwise fashion is what we call financial aid steps. It tells students they don't have to call one stop, it tells them where they are at in the process for their financial aid. In this step 3 in the middle, where it says respond to your awards, when we are in the middle of actual packaging, which happens in July, students, before they're allowed to respond to their awards, which is where they accept or decline, could it be loans, we automatically accept their scholarships. This is where we present them with borrowing history, and you do have a picture or you have an example of what our borrowing history letter looks like in the docket materials. They can't go beyond accept decline until they acknowledge that they have seen their borrowing history. We have been doing a borrowing history since 2015, and this past, not this summer, but the summer before, we were able to pull out the information from the National Student Loan Data System, which is the federal database for any federally known about loans. So if someone started at another institution and came here and had loans there, we're able to take that information out, combine it with our information so they're getting a much more robust picture of what their actual borrowing is. They will also see what their monthly repayment will be over a standard 10-year repayment plan, and it lives in their student information system so they can see it. Students also get a personalized, if you want to call it that, cost of attendance that is based on their college of enrollment and their program. We know that some are more expensive than others depending on some of the costs. All of the question mark icons have information behind them that students had to hunt for before. It's now connected to the data element. And next we have financial aid history, which is my favorite part. This presents students with all of their financial aid history with us and what they can do with this. And it goes back to when they started their enrollment. It goes through all of it. So it's Pell Grants, loans, state grant. They can use the filter box that you see at the top, and they can filter on particular types of aid. If they want to see what kinds of loans they've had, they type in the word loan, it shows up right there. Students are also able to export this to a PDF or Excel if they want to share it with someone else. And this is also quite remarkable, at least in my estimation. It tells them the interest rate because different loans have different interest rates and different repayment terms. And at the bottom, for students who have Pell Grant, Minnesota State Grant, and You Promise, it tells them the amount of aid usage that they have used of that type of grant. And it translates that to how many terms approximately do you have left. And then the final tab that I will show you in a second is the academics tab, and this is available on the Twin Cities and Rochester campus. This is a visual depiction that mimics what we have in our Pell Grant usage, showing students where, if you look at the green bar, if you can see it, that is the benchmark of where a student should be in order to graduate in 4 years. The blue is courses that a student has taken. The yellow are their in-progress credits. So students can see where they are at in their degree program, and we did these intentionally to look similar because there is a tie between your aid usage and your degree progress. There are action plans for students as if they are on track or if they are not on track, and we are working with the other campuses to make this available for their students in the coming year. All right, so now I have to try and do the magic again.
Does that conclude the presentation, or is there more?
We're done.
That's it.
Okay, because I think while you're doing that, I'm going to start teeing up some of my, I know we're going to have a lot of questions, or I think at least think we are. Regent Hsu, do you want to start with that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, presenters. I just want to start with one quick question about where the students live. You know, we had a lot of slides about Minnesota. Are you basing that on their high school address, or I don't understand how the data gets collected for a Minnesota kid?
Yeah, sure. Chair Anderson, Regent Hsu. The way we determine residency and the geography is their home address. And that's kind of the standard that's used in higher education. So if a student has a home address of Wausau, Wisconsin, that's what's used for identifying their location.
Regent Hsu.
So then is there data, since you're using old data basically for addresses, because that's where they went to high school. If they decide not to come back to the state of Minnesota, then is there another analysis that then shows what the indebtedness of Minnesota students is?
I'm not sure I fully follow your question on this. Are you saying they gain residency in Minnesota?
No. What I'm saying is, okay, in high school they graduate, and you have their high school address. So you're using the high school address to calculate all this stuff. But for students that move away from Minnesota to go to school and then never come back, you're still counting them as Minnesota students.
That would be correct, wouldn't it?
So is there another analysis that shows what happens to students after they graduate from whatever college they went to, and if they don't come back to Minnesota, then we don't count them anymore as in terms of their indebtedness? Because you can see where a Minnesota student could go to a really high-cost state, like one of the coasts, or let's say the East Coast, and then they don't come back. Well, we're counting them as if, we're counting their tuition or their loans against Minnesota, whereas they're really not Minnesotans anymore.
We would be doing, sorry, Chair Anderson, Regent Hsu, we would be doing that to the point of graduation. When they graduate, they would be counted as Minnesota residents, let's say in California. And then after that point in time, I assume they would become residents of California if they stay there.
Right, so there's no data afterwards. We can't figure out what's going on after that.
That would be correct.
Okay.
Does that answer the question, Regent Hsu? Okay, thank you. Regent Simonson.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. I appreciate all you're doing to help students with the costs. But as you may know from past meetings, I'm an advocate for looking for ways to lower tuition. And I think on one of your slides, I think you said over a 10-year period, it went up 193, or the 20-year period, 193%, one of the early slides, whatever it was there. And I understand from my business background, I focus on cost of goods sold frequently and how that looks over time. And I look at tuition in a sense, cost of goods sold. Okay, and things that go into that obviously are labor costs, faculty, staff, things like other operational expenses like facilities, those kinds of things. I appreciate that. So this may not be a fair question for you, maybe more of somebody else in administration, but is there any particular area that you could mention that has increase of much greater than what I'd call, an average? You're talking 193, any area that's just gone up substantially like that over that period of time?
Chair Anderson and Regent Simonson, I'm afraid that's way out of my wheelhouse to be commenting on the costs in the different categories, but I believe there are others maybe at the table or in the room who would have a better idea than I do about the differential increases among IT or faculty salaries or infrastructure or energy or the other myriad costs of running a major R1 flagship university.
Thank you. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Vice Provost Master and Director Faulkner. Vice Provost, you talked briefly about the PLUS loans. Maybe you pull that slide back up if you could, because what I'm sensing is that there is a shift going on. I mean, we're moving in the right directions on obviously student indebtedness and graduation, and all the policies that have been in place for a number of years are now showing up in the data, and we're moving in the right direction, both against ourselves and in the industry. But at the end of the day, it's a family that has to handle debt. It's not just a student. And if we're shifting debt from the student to the parents, and I can't tell from this, I can't tell a lot from this other than the fact that, as you mentioned, that has been increasing. But would you be able to produce for this board the family's indebtedness coming out of college, not just the students, as you roll those together per student? You know, if you were to put a number around the parents' average debt that comes out and put that in with the students for a family, what is that going to look like over, and how many years have we been able to produce that PLUS data? Because I've not seen the PLUS data ever as that have been on the board. It's good information, but it feels like new information.
Chair Anderson and Regent Beeson, my belief is, and I'd probably have to check back with our analysts on this, that we could in fact produce that the amount of indebtedness from PLUS loans for families and produce some distributions of that. In fact, I think maybe we have some of those slides. We didn't bring them today because of limitations that show not only the distribution of student loans themselves, but student plus parent plus loans. So those data are in fact obtainable and presentable.
So follow up, Vice Provost, what would you predict those slides would show?
I think those slides would parallel what you're seeing here in that over the last half decade, the borrowing has shifted, and you can also see a bit of a shift into the private sector here, but has shifted into parents bearing more of the loan burden for the family.
I think we would see that the preponderance is within our middle income families, because as Vice Provost McMaster presented, that is where there is very little to none gift aid, unless they are having a merit scholarship. So I think we would see it in the middle income families mostly. The one thing that we probably wouldn't be able to do, or I know we wouldn't be able to, is we don't know if parents borrow from sources other than Parent Plus. They may have a relationship with a bank that is where they choose to, or a credit union or something where they choose to borrow.
Or a second mortgage.
Or a second mortgage. And those things we wouldn't know about.
Thank you.
Understood. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and presenters. I think the board, I trust my colleague would be interested in seeing that more expansive data that includes those other sources to the extent that we have those, and it looks like we do have some now. Thank you. Thanks again.
Student Representative Basanich.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters. So kind of on the same slide that was referenced earlier, are the 395% and 191% increases in scholarship and grants and tuition respectively adjusted for inflation? And then what has been the trend in cost of attendance, thinking holistically about the price of higher education?
Go ahead,
Chair
Vice Provost,
Anderson, Representative Basanovich, these are not standardized for a cost of adjusted for costs. There are two different indices you could use here. One, the most standard index you use is the HEPI, the Higher Education Index. In terms of the cost of attendance, could you follow through with that a bit further? What do you have in mind there?
Yeah, so just the historic trend of cost of attendance in general, that graph obviously just talks about tuition rates, but we know that across the state, housing is increasing, and then fees towards students for things like activities, athletic facilities, those types of things are shifting more and more onto students as well. You have numbers that kind of represent not just tuition, but the actual cost of attending the university.
We definitely have cost of attendance numbers as well. The cost of attendance number is critical because that's what's used in calculating net price, where you take the cost of attendance and then subtract out the gift aid. Certainly, and this would maybe Director Faulkner could comment on this, certainly the tuition rates and fees have been going up more quickly than the full cost of attendance because housing and food has not been going up at the same rate. Using the University of Minnesota as an example, our administration has worked very hard to keep those costs at the low end of the Big Ten. And so in terms of cost of attendance, that's where we sit quite well. So absolutely, you have to include that. You also have to take into account fees. I think you'd see fees going up similarly across the country. I don't think there's anything unique in terms of our fee signature on top of our tuition signature.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to remind my colleagues here and also the presenters, this is really, really important stuff. We're trying to keep the cost of the students down. But we do have another presentation. I do want to continue on with this questioning because it is that important. But I'll ask the questioners to be brief and the answers to be brief if we can. Okay? That way we'll get more answered. Student Representative King.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thank you, presenters. My question was, I know that we are talking about undergrad affordability, which is a great topic to talk about, but I was also wondering, how does financial support compare to our graduate students and our undergrad students overall? And also, how is that going to affect our, because we are going towards a higher education purpose? And also, how do our presentation, how do our financial resources also affect our first generation students as well?
Chair Anderson, Representative King, you asked about graduate education. Did I do that correctly on top of this? So we don't have data on graduate education here within this. Certainly, one of the contributors in terms of the overall indebtedness of the student is the debt that a student, she or he, carries into graduate school. And there are lots of data that shows the total indebtedness for a student across the spectrum. We aren't ready to talk about that here because we don't have those data with us. That would be another conversation.
Thank you. Regents Figum.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I might fail at being brief.
That doesn't surprise me.
If I could, Vice President McMaster, I'd like to focus in and ultimately get back to your presentation on student success. And badgering students to sign up for their classes in the summer, I think is a good thing, but I'd like to further that a little bit. To prepare for that, so you can think about the student success and enhancing that, what you do, what the ideas are, what the paths are. I'm going to tell you from my perspective, I don't believe that a $26,500 average debt for a student that graduates and get a job in his or her field of study is all that bad. When you consider lifelong earning, when you consider the value that education gives them, I don't think it's that bad. $26,500. It doesn't appall me. I'm not shocked by it. I am really shocked by the students we have, which are numerous, that don't get a degree in 4 or 5 years, that don't get a job in their field of study, and saddle them with that 26,500 or maybe even more because they might be on their 5th or 6th or 7th year. That's why I want to get back to student success. But before that, I will make this comment, and this is just my perception, members. It doesn't have to be yours. I don't think we have a student debt problem as much as we do have a student tuition problem. I think it's tuition that drives the debt. In fact, you referred to that, Bob, yourself when you said you had a chart that said Penn State has the highest debt, but immediately you said, but of course they have the highest tuition. You linked them together right there. You said that yourself. And my sense is that during the 05, 06, 07, 08, 09, 10, 11, when we were increasing tuition here at the university by 14, 12, 10, 7%, and that's what we did in those areas. We were using students as the ATM machine. We didn't control spending at the university, or this is all college, not just Minnesota, this is all college. We didn't become more efficient, we didn't control spending, we just used students as the ATM machine, we just passed on the costs. This is my perception. I might be wrong, but I think that is probably true. Now, having said that, Vice President McMaster, let's get back to student success. Badger them, get them their degree in 5 years. I don't care how you badger them. Or you didn't like the word badger, yes. But we got to get them their degree and we got to get them a job. Can you help me more in what we do in student success other than calling them in the summer if they haven't already signed up for their classes?
Sure. Yes.
Chair
Anderson.
Have a short answer for that?
Yeah, I do not have a short answer. I'm sorry for that. I will try to make it short. Chair Henderson and Regent Swigum, I agree with most everything you said. I will point out that those significant increases in our tuition parallel very closely the disinvestment in state support for this university. And so the university did not have much of a choice if we wanted to maintain
Mr.
the
Chairman,
yeah.
which Bob paralleled the significant economic problem we had after 9/11
yeah.
and in 2007 and 8. They paralleled directly with that.
Yeah.
And Bob, education was different because General Mills and Swigum Farms became more efficient, and Hennepin County became more efficient at that time. We spent less. Right? Maybe it wasn't true about the college. Continue.
Sure. So there are dozens and dozens of initiatives around student success that we have in place. And it would take me the next 3 hours to go through them. And I'd love to do that, but one of them would be around the messaging, around timely graduation. From the moment a student steps on this campus, they're told that the expectation is they're getting out in 4 years. In fact, at convocation a week ago, our president gave out a tassel to these students, emphasizing that message. We look at advising. We've increased the number of advisors, advisor training. The systems that you just saw around amping up the knowledge of financial wellness and financial literacy, around the curriculum, reducing degree credits in many of the majors so that students could get out more expeditiously, increasing the amount of financial aid so that students are not having to work as much and can focus on their studies. Do you want me to continue? Or?
Well, I think student success is the key to me, from my perception.
You know, I agree completely. Absolutely.
So may I not take the chairman's more time, but talk more about the different programs at a later time?
Okay, thank you very much. Regent Powell.
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and thanks, Vice Provost McMaster and Director Faulkner. And there's no doubt in my mind that you guys very focused on this, very committed to managing student debt. This is an area where I disagree with my friend Regent Swigum. I think less debt's better. The lower we can get it, the better. And so. Because they're going to go on and they're going to carry and their family's going to have that debt and getting them out of here with the lowest amount of debt possible should be our goal. And I appreciate all the stuff all the work that you're doing here. Question I have, a couple of points. First of all, I think we've sort of held it steady here over the last 4 or 5 years, which is good. I mean, that is good. I think we need a goal. I mean, I think so what do we want to do over the next 5 years or 10 years? Could we get it to 23 or 24 or what? And I think actually being able to reduce it by 8-10% would be a tremendous positive for the university, to be able to position ourselves as the Big Ten university with the graduates who graduate with the least amount of debt. Super powerful message within the state and around the country. So I think it'd be really good if we had a goal. I think it'd be helpful. I'd love to understand the literacy initiative and how that might translate into concrete debt reduction. It looks like a smart program and great program, but it'd be great if we could link it to, we think it's going to be worth this much. You didn't mention work study, but actually in your table, I mean, it's for those students who come from families with low income. I mean, it's actually a big part of the whole package. It could be 10%. And so one of the questions I have is that an area that we can press harder on? I mean, work study. I know that there can be federal funding. I'm looking for tactics, I guess that can kind of help us continue to drive this down and maybe grasping at straws a bit. But I appreciate the work you're doing. I think we need a goal for where we want it, what the next step is here, and try to kind of come up with a set of initiatives and quantify them that are going to get us to a particular place. So I don't know that a response is needed, but I do appreciate, your focus here.
Thank you. You want a quick response? Go ahead, sir.
Yes, Chair Anderson and Regent Powell. All excellent points. I wish I could comment on each one. I will comment on work study. You're spot on. Work study programs are critical for many reasons. One is obviously reducing debt. Another is it engages students on the campus. They work in an office, they work in a lab, they work for a department, and they get mentorship from the leaders in that department, from the staff. And we find that students who do work in that venue, work study, and who take advantage of it have better graduation rates because they're getting that internal mentorship through engagement on the campus. So if I could expand that program by 100%, that would be terrific. Of course, those funds come from the federal government and the state.
Thank you. Regent Rocha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to be called right after the comments by Regent Powell. I think it's a very nice setup. Based on time, I have some questions, but I'm going to just make a couple observations at this moment, and they go a little bit to tactics. I agree when I think about this as a critical topic, considering the mission of the university. As I first saw this, I thought, well, after the first 3 slides, we could stop and have a 50-minute conversation. I mean, this is just so much to throw in, and financial literacy, every one of them is its own very lengthy topic. And to the extent that we can have these conversations through, as we go forward, I think would be really helpful, mostly because we're not going to come away from here with a sense of what the board's perspective is. Affordability is affected by virtually everything that comes before this board, whether we talk to, the administrative costs, and this is something that my colleague Regent Spigum has spoken to before, services to students as, the student representative, we talked about what are the things that we're offering to students, and that's a very complex conversation, but all those things add to affordability questions. And then, whether we're admitting a full class of students per campus, per college, per program. When we say, well, we want to preserve an ACT profile, so we're going to only admit this many students, we're affecting affordability for every student that is on campus. I want to give a little context on when, particularly for the class of 19, when we show the 15% graduation rate back in the early 90s, it's really not an apples to apples comparison. We had general college, university college historically where we had, and we had extension classes. We had a lot of people counted as head count students, but they weren't really degree granting programs. And so it's a little bit misleading, but a prior board or boards during that period decided we're going to work on graduation rate. And I'm thrilled to see that we have become among the most successful within our peer group as a conference. And so the things that Vice Provost McMaster talked about in advising, and I mean, these are all really important things, and I'm pleased to see that we're doing that. However, now, when we move into this tuition stuff, and we talk about the tuition versus scholarship gift aid, these numbers, the 395 versus the 191, it's, you know, with a hat tip to Ben Disraeli about statistics, it can be a little bit misleading. And if you take if a student has $25,000 in tuition, we'll go to the state rate, we'll say $14,000 in tuition, and they're getting $5 in scholarship aid, then the next year, you know, they're at $21,000 in tuition and they get, you know, $40 in financial, you know, the financial aid went up way up, far more, but the base was so much lower that the impact is quite different. So I want to make sure that when we start moving back and forth between hard numbers and percentages, that we don't sort of lose track of what we're talking about. I also note that when we were looking at the data among the other institutions, we were talking about only freshmen entering freshman data. We know that we have a large number of transfer students, and so that's going to have an impact. And my estimation is a lot of those students were students that made decisions to go to community colleges and other schools for cost reasons, and so they may end up reflecting a greater financial need. But I want to talk, when we talk about financial aid, and I want to push back a little bit on the presumption that institutionally offered financial aid is the key to addressing the affordability problem. I think it actually adds to the affordability problem. I think it's a challenge. When I think about the proper public policy conversation about financial aid, we have federal programs directed at financial aid, we have state programs, and we have philanthropy. The foundation at one point had an initiative to try to increase the amount of money being raised to endow scholarships for students. That's brilliant, and because it's pay it forward by voluntary means, people choosing to give their own money to support the next generation. When we increase tuition and then use part of that tuition to provide financial aid to a certain group of students based on imperfect data, which is a generous description, I think, it's pay it sideways by force. And oftentimes you'll have student A providing funds through tuition that go to student B, but in reality, student A, who may be tied to a FAFSA but not receiving money from home, has fewer resources available, whereas student B is now getting this, but they have either access because it's a cash-based income family or because they have other financial aid opportunities. It's a very inefficient way of doing this, and it also it begs a certain question, and you can understand why a student today who faces that might be frustrated. Imagine driving to a state park at 22 years old, and when you go to pay your fee, they ask to see your parents' tax records. And based on what your parents are earning, they determine how much you have to pay to use this public good of going to a state park. It probably ought not be that way, that people ought to have access to a public good on a balanced basis. And well, it'll be interesting because tonight there'll be a debate among people who have a reasonable chance of becoming president, and I think the zeitgeist among that population is that we should be going for free college. But at the same time, we don't really focus on what the cost of the college is as much as, you know, we talk about, well, how do we find this financial aid opportunity? And I would say, and I know this is somewhat of a harsh criticism, but institutional financial aid generated through tuition is, I would call it the opioid of higher education funding. It feels good. We can raise more money by increasing tuition and then tell ourselves it doesn't hurt anybody because we're going to direct some percentage of it to a few students as financial aid. But it eats away at the mission of the university to provide an education to the, as the original charter stated, the industrious classes of the state. But it also keeps us from trying to be as efficient as we possibly can in finding those places where we can promote affordability by keeping those costs down. So those are the comments I wanted to make, Mr. Chair. We didn't really have an opportunity to, I don't know how we ever get at that, but where we as a board can sort of raise our hand and say we're fine with this increased tuition against this aid model, or if we want to start to focus again on how to maintain affordability. I'll close with a quote from Regent David Rowe, with whom I served in a bygone era. He was the retired president of the AFL-CIO, fairly well in touch with the working classes of the state. And in his his statement was clear that the best financial aid is low tuition. And so from that standpoint, I think we should work really hard on identifying how we can promote that value and not suggest that we're not really doing harm because we have some nugget of financial aid to a small group of students. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Apologize for my time management skills up here, but we have Regent Herr and Regent Mayron. Regent Kenyatta just signed up, I'm sorry. But Regent Herr and Regent Mayron, you have about 90 seconds for each for a comment, and then we have one more presentation, and we have to catch a bus at noon, so my colleagues know that. And it's the only bus. So Regent Herr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is regarding around data, and I didn't see it, and hopefully it exists, but I would like to see it in the future. And it goes around the indebtedness and who, around low income, broken down by income, race, and gender. That would inform my thinking about strategy on what we need to do in terms of targeting messaging and who. Thank you.
Do you have an answer for that, or we're just going to?
Chair Anderson, Regent Herr, we certainly can get those disaggregated data by race, ethnicity, income level. We can slice and dice this many ways.
Regent Mayron.
Mine had to do with the data as well, and that is a lot of the focus here is on Twin City data. Do we have comparable data for the other campuses that is not part of the presentation? And generally, how does it compare to the stats you're giving us on the Twin City data? Is it mirrored? Is it different? Are there anomalies?
Regent Anderson, Regent Mayron, if you looked at the indebtedness, we actually do have some extra slides in here on the system campuses that we're not going to be able to get to. There are some differences. So, for instance, Duluth tends to be a little higher on debt. In terms of the total amount of gift aid, that varies significantly by campus. So there is a story there we could tell, and we'd have to come back with the similar data for all the system campuses. For every piece of data you saw today, we have it for the system campuses as well.
Thank you. Regent Kenyatta, do you have something?
Yeah, I believe my colleagues left about 60 of their seconds on the table, so I'm going to use them. I'll switch my questions to comments, and I'll be brief. One was about, that's actually the slide we have up now. Often when we're talking about costs, we're talking about the higher education index. And I believe that makes total sense when we're talking about, from the university's perspectives, our costs and whatnot. But it never makes sense to me for that to be what we're looking at from the family and student perspective, because that's not the world they live in, and that's not the inflation and cost that they're using. So just to comment on that. And then Regent Mayron led right to my next point, and Regent Swigham's comments, there was a lot of them, but one that made sense is that Regent Swigham said that he's more worried about the student that leaves with $26,000 and not with a degree, right, and without a degree, and honed in on graduation rates. And I was going to say that I would love if this board really made it an initiative and a priority to have our system campus rates, graduation rates mirror the Twin Cities campus. And I know that some of them are low but comparable to their peers, but it'd still be a great goal of ours to say we still want to see those higher. And I'm sure it's already being worked towards, but if this board could support that.
So thank you, and I have a lot of ideas, a lot of questions too, but it's just not going to be time. But one thing I would like to ask, and I think I know the answer, our 3-year graduation rate, percentage-wise, is growing even faster than our 4-year graduation rate. Is that a fair statement? And if so, we should be doing everything we can to let kids graduate in the most timely fashion, because you did say 5 years here, borrowing goes up, debt goes up. I would expect 3 years, it's conversely true that if paid less, borrowing goes down, debt goes down. Fair statement?
Chair Anderson, that's a very fair statement. It looks as though, based on early data, the 3-year graduation rate for the most recent class is going to be 8%.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And I know just a couple of years ago it was about 3%. So thank you very much. We're going to be on to our next presentation. Thanks. Thank you. Our next presentation is going to be about outreach. And it's going to be about outreach, and it's going to include the Bell Museum and Glensheen. And I think Provost Hanson, are you going to tee this up for us?
With a couple words, thank you, Chair Anderson. The board has expressed a clear interest in looking at all aspects of the university's outreach mission, and we'll be doing that over the course of a number of meetings. But today you have the opportunity for discussion with and about 2 units that engage primarily and precisely with Minnesota outreach. You're first from Daniel Hartman, who's the director of Glensheen Museum in Duluth. And after that short presentation, we'll hear from Denise Young, Executive Director of the Bell Museum in St. Paul. And then Daniel and Denise will take your questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm just going to remind you that you've kind of heard me say in jest that our bus leaves at noon, and that is true. So anything you can do.
Right.
I mean, it's important stuff, but I just want you to be cognizant of that because our regents do like to ask questions to probe a little bit more, as you can understand. Thank you very much. And I guess it's Director Hartman going for it first. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Anderson and Board of Regents, for allowing us this opportunity to speak. This is something for us at Glensheen. We're just kind of excited to talk about this. And several of you in the room we've talked to before, but just thank you for the opportunity. So I'm going to go right into our first slide. And I want to point out, too, that she did a phenomenally better job of making her slides look better. My graphic designers went back to class, so I apologize for that. But so this is Glensheen, a 39-room mansion on the shore of Lake Superior. It's this beautiful 12-acre property, but a lot of people don't realize it's a house museum. People think of it as an attraction. It is a museum. In fact, house museums are the #1 type of museum in the country. 40% of all museums are house museums. In Minnesota alone, there are 100 plus in our state. And what I love about house museums is that I joke that we're the museum buffet. Because you have history, you have horticulture, you have art history, you have a wide variety of things that different academic departments of the university utilize all the time. And so that's what I love about us house museums. And this picture behind you is Meadowbrook Hall, which is actually part of the University of Oakland in Michigan. So it's actually a house museum that's actually much larger than ours, but I will say we have tripled their attendance, just saying. So I'm also to brag a little bit about the turnaround we've had at Glensheen. House museums across the country have been on this death spiral since 1976. And I'm proud to say that from 2013 to now, we have more than doubled our Glensheen attendance. We've reversed this really negative trend nationally. And I'm super proud that we even beat our record year of 1981, which I'll be honest, I thought wasn't even possible. And so I think that's just kind of a cool thing that we should be proud of as a university, that we own this house museum that really bopped the whole national trend. And just to show you that we didn't fluff the numbers, this is our tour ticket sale receipts. So in 2013, it was around 700,000, and this last fiscal year, it's 1.7 million. And so you can talk what you want about tour attendance. This is just straight up math. This is our ticket sales. And so this has had a very positive impact on Glensheen's bottom line. We've actually put nearly $500,000 of money back into the property itself just out of ticket sales. And this has been a fun thing to talk about. And on that same note, what's really unique about Glensheen compared to most museums, not just in the U of M, but frankly in general, is that it's almost entirely paid for operationally by ticket sales. I mean, we only get $50,000 a year of operational support from the university, which is far less than the vast majority of other U of M museums. And so what I like to say is that we are a very high ROI when you consider how many visitors we have per year, how much faculty use Glensheen, how much university events take place at Glensheen, and I think most importantly, and I'll talk about this later, how many students use Glensheen. And so that's why something I like to talk about. But, in the end, why does Glensheen matter? First, the whole place is built off of mining money developed by Chester Condon. And so it really represents this Minnesota legacy connected to mining. Chester is the one in the legislature who passes the bill to fund the University of Minnesota to do research on this thing we call taconite. I mean, so we are just integral to that story, and no one else is telling that story but Glensheen. And then I think the thing that, frankly, our visitors connect to, and a lot of faculty and staff connect to, is the Minnesota Artist Connection to Glensheen. So, for example, in this room, the art glass is done by the Minneapolis Handicraft Guild. The room is designed by John Bradstreet. This is some of the best interior designers in our state's history, and people really get into this history. And frankly, they just love the just natural beauty of this room, and they love when they hear that it's done by Minnesotans. And so that's what's so great about Glensheen is the architect is Minnesotan, the interior designers are Minnesotan. It is a Minnesota house museum. A lot of these other giant mansions in Minnesota are built by designers from the East Coast or the West Coast, not Glensheen. It represents the best of Minnesota architecture and design at the turn of the century. So beyond the tour, which I do want to point out, we see 140,000 visitors. Just on the tour alone, that makes us the most visited house museum in the Midwest. We actually beat out Chicago 2 years ago as the most visited house museum in that area, which we're pretty proud of. The Hill House in the Twin Cities has only around 60,000 visitors. So it really gives you an idea of how popular Glensheen is with the state of Minnesota. We have visitors from every legislative area in the entire state of Minnesota, which is partly why it's so popular at the legislatures. Everyone knows about it. And I think this is kind of a bad thing, but only 5% of my visitors actually come from the Duluth area. The lion's share of them are actually from the Twin Cities metro area and then southern Minnesota. And so we really have a really big statewide use. Now, beyond the tour, because the tour is so popular, these other things get forgotten. And right now, we are an anchor that's part of the UMD Museum Studies program. Every time they go and travel, we are one of the places that they visit. When it comes to horticulture, the Extension Service has been using our vegetable garden as a trial bed for a number of years. And so they'll do a trial of plants at Glensheen, and then they do a trial of plants up on top of the hill just to see what changes because there's a high moisture content because of the lake of the moisture coming off of the lake. So I joke about this, but it's true. Our corn is juicier. No joke. But also in recent years, we've begun experimenting with the U of M horticulture department. And so we have the Ole and Lena roses. Our rose garden is all U of M roses now, which I think is a kind of a cool way to show off our U of M connection in a lot of different ways. And beyond that, we've had year offs at Glensheen since I can remember. We had a student who's a graphic designer redo one of our wallpapers, and when we go back to the original wall cover, we'll use her graphic design work to do that work. And I'm going to point out that the reason I am here today is my senior directed research as a student at UMD was the grounds of Glensheen. And that was my year out project, my senior year. And so I am directly connected to this undergraduate research as well. It's what we use today as our grounds tour. And then also, we are one of the most used university properties. The week I was putting this presentation together, we had an English department, a biology department, and a physics department all utilizing Glensheen. We have 50 plus university departments using us a year. Also, Glensheen, as of late, has become a community space. So we have these concert series on the lake. We have a Winter Village event. Our Winter Village event brought in 20,000 people in 2 days. But where I want to end is this. What I think really speaks the most to Glensheen is that we get 1,300 students, UMD students, a year who tour Glensheen for fun. They don't tour this because the professor tells them to. They come because they want to. And that shows the raw kind of organic interest in this place that I think sometimes people view negatively, that, oh, it's an attraction. No, that just shows you how great of a museum space it is and why for the last 3 years, Glensheen's been called the best museum in Duluth, according to the Duluth News Tribune. We just won it like 2 weeks ago. But anyways, but with further ado, that'll be my speech. And once again, thank you to the Board of Regents and Chair Anderson for allowing this opportunity.
Terrific. We're gonna have Director Young of the Bell Museum go, and then we're gonna ask for questions. Director Young, great to have you here. I must admit, I did see your portable planetarium. I don't know if that's what it's called, but it was in the gym at Alec Area High School. And I know you were up there that day, and there were lines of people to go into it, students and people. So it's fun to see you again, and thanks for bringing it up there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Anderson and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity. It has been a very exciting time, as many of you know, at the Bell Museum over the last few years, and particularly this last year. And I will share some of that with you. I also wanted to just let you know I'm going to approach outreach and impact from a variety of different perspectives, and I'm going to go fast, and so here we go. I want to start with a little bit of background. The Bell Museum started in 1872. when the legislature called for a state museum of natural history that would collect, preserve, interpret, and tell the story of the rich biodiversity of Minnesota, and at that time said that the museum would be here at the University of Minnesota. So for almost 150 years, the Bell Museum has been active. We are proud that CFANS is our home base. CFANS has a strong and historic commitment to research, teaching, and public outreach, and we feel like we fit in well there. The Bell Museum holds, this is part most people don't know about the Bell Museum, we hold 1.2 million biological specimens of plant and animal life in Minnesota and beyond. We have many curators who are tenure-track faculty members who also hold a curatorial appointment at the Bell Museum. And so all of the things that come with tenure and tenure-track faculty members, graduate students, research agendas, undergraduates, teaching, happen through the Bell Museum. Our curators care for and add to, and importantly, conduct research using our collections on topics such as biodiversity, plant-animal environment relationships over time, climate change, invasive species, and more. Our collections are used here at the University of Minnesota. They are in use by academics globally, museum curators globally, and also state and federal agencies. So we have regular work with the Department of Natural Resources here in the state, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and others. And so as many museums are digitizing their collections, we are as well. And when we digitize our collections, we make them more and more accessible to people such as school children and teachers. So I wanted to just start by saying our science is a really big part of the outreach of the Bell Museum. Moving on to public education. As many of you know, our new facility opened just over a year ago in July of 2018. I'm proud to report that our first year on-site attendance was nearly 231,000 visitors. That is up from an average of about 38,000 visitors in our previous location, so significant increase there. The docket materials you have explain a little more about who those 231,000 people are and where they come from broadly on a map. I also wanted to share that our household memberships have increased substantially. When you become a member of a place like the Bell Museum, you're showing a deeper level of commitment to the mission. Our household memberships moved from 700 household members before we opened to over 6,800. And what I find significant about that is about 65% of our household members have no prior relationship to the University of Minnesota. So they are not alums, they're not donors, and so we are finding that the Bell Museum is an entry point for people who may not have had any other reason or opportunity to engage with the university. Just drilling a little deeper about the 231,000, 25,000 of our visitors this past year were school children attending on a field trip. It is not lost on us at the Bell Museum that when they are coming to visit the museum, they are coming to visit the University of Minnesota. This allows us to double our impact. Perhaps these students who are coming are the next Golden Gophers. We don't know. But they are certainly the next generation workforce and residents of our state who will learn to understand the value of the university to our state. I've spent a lot of time talking with teachers over the last year. One of them told me after a field trip that she felt like our new Bell Museum building was, and these are her words, providing a warm embrace to her and her students, that's what the university did with the new Bell Museum. We work very closely with school districts to provide opportunities that support and extend the required science curriculum in the classroom, and we do that in ways and with materials that teachers just don't have access to in their schools. Students, while they're here, are also interacting with researchers, visiting labs, really getting to see the university from the inside out. And as a former classroom teacher myself, I'm a proud kindergarten teacher. I understand the value of these experiences on the trajectories and life experiences of children. Those should not be underestimated. These are very powerful experiences. Moving on to lifelong learners, the Bell Museum is about, we say, lifelong, life-wide, and life-deep learning. There are different purposes, as we all know, to learning at different phases and stages of our lives. Sometimes it is to prepare for a career. Sometimes it's to pursue a passion or to solve a problem we're having in our lives or to more fully connect with our community and our democracy. We have seen an explosion of family visitors at the Bell Museum over the last year, and in particular, multi-generational families. So grandparents, parents, and children, as in this picture here. What we are learning about family visitors is, in talking with them, is that they're using the Bell Museum to pass on the values and principles that we hold dear in Minnesota. Those are sometimes clean water, care for the environment, respect for nature. Just as important is fostering a love for learning as a value that we hold dear here. And I should also say we're seeing a lot of adult-only visitors to the museum, so adults coming on their own or as part of groups with community education and such. University students. We are thrilled with the level of engagement of university students at the museum. We employ about 115 students at the Bell Museum, such as Amina. They, of course, are from across Minnesota and other places. They're the first people you see when you walk into the museum. They're at our ticket desk, they're giving the tours, but they're also working back of house, helping with fundraising, marketing, exhibit design, retail, merchandising, and more. They are putting what they learn in their classrooms to practical use in real and tangible ways at the museum. I'm going to, in the interest of time, just talk a little bit about where we're headed. We're up and running. Things are going well at the new Bell Museum, and we're filling unmet needs in our community here. But our staff and our advisory board and our volunteers and others are extremely interested in extending our reach across the state. We're the state's Natural History Museum. We work here at the University of Minnesota statewide system and are very proud of that and want to leverage the resources of the new museum to serve the entire state. So we have engaged in some strategic planning around statewide reach that leverages our strengths and core competencies, meets real needs, can be financially viable and sustainable. And we've been working very closely with the talented students from the Carlson School of Business to help us develop a framework and a strategy for statewide reach. Chair Anderson mentioned the Explore-Dome Portable Planetarium as one thing that we already do that serves 15,000 people annually, but our goal is to serve more people in greater Minnesota than we do on site and in the Twin Cities, and we've set that goal at about 500,000 people a year. We hope to get there within 5 years. So with that, I think we're happy to answer questions.
Terrific. Great presentation.
Thank you very much.
It's kind of funny. People have accused me of my mind working in different ways. I heard Director Hartman talk about mining, and I thought I heard Regent McMillan start cheering, and sure enough, he is going to be asking a question. And the other thing I heard that I had to chuckle because I'm going to use this line when I go home. Executive Director Young mentioned that the membership brings a deeper level of commitment to people. I am going to use that line on my wife about why I'm going to the golf course so often, because I now have a deeper level of commitment to members.
Yes.
Let's start with Regent McMillan. I guess you want to ask a question or have a comment.
Thank you, Regent Anderson, and I did perk up on my couch side seat here as Director Hartman was speaking. But first of all, I'll start with a comment on Director Young's report. I had the opportunity about 3 weeks ago to attend the open house at the North Central Research and Outreach Center in Grand Rapids, just about 50 miles from where I live. And I want to commend Denise and her team on jumping in and being part of that event. And the thing that I want to highlight the most is just the fact that getting out into upstate Minnesota, and whether you're bringing along the portable planetarium, which I laid on the floor of and enjoyed the show immensely, or any other of these activities, just helping Minnesotans understand that we are a statewide institution and that our reach is that broad, and people just are stunned by that, just like they are when they drive on London Road and see the Block M hanging there on the side of the Glensheen mansion and go, oh, I didn't know that was part of the university. So anyway, one more comment on Glensheen and its mission, and then a question for Director Hartman. The comment is this, and thank you so much for bringing up the connection between Mr. Congdon and mining, and taconite specifically. And some of you on the board have heard me talk about this before, but I know many regents struggle with the mission-related piece of Glensheen and how does it fit. And I think Director Hartman's done a great job of showing you many different ways. But for me, it's not even a question of fit with mission. Without Chester Congdon, and I'm not making too big of a stretch here, historians can check, we may not have ever had any of the money that came from the conversion of royalties into permanent university fund money if he hadn't intervened and made sure that didn't all become Eastern United States money. And Dan Hartman can give you that whole history. What's the point? That translates, that work by Congdon, that investment, that intervention, when the Rockefellers are trying to take that money to different parts of the country, into almost half of our permanent university fund endowment and almost half of the corpus of the money that Stuart Mason manages for us. I'm not talking about UMF money. I'm talking about the $1.3 billion that we hold in our own endowment, and something close to 50% of that. It's closer to 45. Haven't asked lately, but it's a very big number. All comes from permanent university money funds, and almost all of that comes from iron ore. So I just think, to me, that solidifies the question of what's the connection of this place where Chester Congdon lived to our overall mission. Here's the question. Thanks for indulging me there, Chair Anderson. Director Hartman, what do you see as the biggest opportunity coming your way, thinking about challenges and opportunities, but I'm really interested in what's the biggest thing coming in the next year or two for you, and congratulations in spades to the work you've done.
Okay, thank you, Regent McMillan, and Director Hartman is here, and he'll answer that question. I believe you heard it.
Thank you, Chair Anderson and Regent McMillan, and thank you for all of your complimentary language as well. I think I'm kind of excited for, Glensheen's next chapter. I think we've really connected with a visitation side, and we'll continue to go down that road, but the part that's growing is that university connection. We've really only just begun to start to reach out to the different departments of the university system-wide. For example, we haven't really reached out yet to the University of Minnesota's architecture program yet. They would be a natural fit with Glensheen. We have just begun a relationship with the U of M horticulture department, and that's been already being given back in spades in the last 2 years. And, part of the reason it's hard for us to do that is our entire staffing right now is dedicated to making sure the tour model works, because frankly, all of our money is based off ticket sales. And so I think if there's ever a next potential chapter or a what if situation for Glensheen is, we currently don't have an educator on staff. We currently don't have a development officer on staff, because both of those roles aren't connected to ticket sale revenue, which, that's the only way I pay for those positions. And so I think there's always that what if situation. What if Glensheen becomes that normal museum of the University of Minnesota, where we have an educator on staff who has the time to reach out to all these different academic departments, and we have this, I would call this next chapter of involvement. And I'm kind of excited for that. And I will say it's already happening, because as Glensheen's gained in popularity, departments get to hear about it. So for example, the Large Lakes Observatory wrote a grant and is now going to put a weather station on the boathouse of Glensheen so that they can watch the weather patterns that are going across Lake Superior. They want to put I apologize, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to say this word correctly, but like an erosion monitor on the bottom of the Lake Superior so they can see what's going on the lake. And because Glensheen has an historic pier and there's a pipe that goes out through the pier, they're going to put it through the pipe out into the lake. I apologize for sounding so informal, but I am not a scientist. But that's just a good example of some of the small things that are happening because of this property in sight. We have a designated trout stream on the property. That's a whole other conversation that's going on in different circles. And so when people think of Glensheen, they think of the mansion, but honestly, the vast majority of academic uses haven't been mansion related. We had a graduate student, Emily Ellingson, who did research on the eastern hemlock because Glensheen, as far north as you're going to find this eastern hemlock, because Chester brought it 100 years ago. It's not supposed to be there. But it's just part of the legacy of Glensheen.
Thank you. Thank you. Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, presenters. And Director Hartman, you've done really yeoman's duty on the mansion, and the numbers speak for themselves. And I had a chance to go up there in July and tour it again. And the practical approach you're taking, just continually improving. This is a forever process that relates to the house. And I'm, just very, very impressed. Yesterday I took a tour, and Chair McMillan talked about our research and outreach centers. I just encourage colleagues to get out and visit all of them during your term on the board. The one I went to yesterday is in the metro area, on the outskirts, up in Isani, Anoka County, and that's Cedar Creek Reserve. Really important work. The other museums in the system are doing important work. They're not as high profile, but I learned something every time. And this summer I had a chance to go up to Itasca, and that had been many, many years since I'd done that. Question I want to ask Director Young, I remember when this building was financed from the state, there was concern about the lack of operating support that accompanied the capital money. And I can only imagine what the numbers look like. So are you going to be, once you normalize operations, are you going to be able to self-finance the operations and have a surplus so that you can look at expanding programming or the building? Or what's the money side of this looking like at this point?
Executive Director Young.
Yeah, Chair Anderson and Regent Beeson, thank you for that question. We were able to secure all of the funding to complete the project without any debt, which was incredible. So it was a $79.2 million total project budget, including the $51.5 million from the state, and then university support of $6 million. And then we raised, approximately $20 million to open the museum. We are in a state now where we are balanced budget. Our, of course, earned revenue went up. We've diversified our funding streams, earned revenue. We do have fundraising professionals on our staff who are working on philanthropic support as well. And we have grant funding. So part of our research is funded through grants, and part of our education programs funded through grants as well. So we are starting to save for our future. That is an important priority for me as someone who knows that places like museums enjoy, I guess, a lot of love and have wear and tear over time and need to be constantly refreshed so that people will continue to come back to them. And so we're in a good place right now. And of course, we have university support as well.
Thank you. That answers the question. Regent Hsu.
Thank you, Chair Anderson. Thank you, Directors Hartman and Young. You both have been doing a great job, one with a really old building, one with a really new building, but really a reboot of an old museum. I just had a couple questions. I did attend the Glensheen Gala this year. I didn't get on apparently did not get in line early enough to be on the coveted Scotch tour. But I think Regent McMillan was on that. But I think everything is happening that we thought would happen. The one thing about the money that was, I guess, in our budget a couple years ago that had to have a match or whatever, I still don't really understand how that works. But could you give me an understanding of, give all of us an idea of the matching funds and whether or not you've been able to use any of those funds, and if so, what? And then, before you go on that, I'm just going to ask the other question, just so I don't get cut off. Director Young, or Executive Director Young, the next phase, you didn't talk about what, if there was a phase 2, but originally there was a phase 2 of the Bell Museum. And I was just wondering kind of what the planning on that was.
Director Young, and then Director Hartman, the question about, does the state match, is that what that's about? And if you have any information on that, that's great. If you don't, you can follow up offline, but I don't want to put you on a spot, but you probably do know. Director Young, you want to answer his question first?
Sure. Chair Anderson and Regent Hsu, are you referring to the property just south of the Bell? Yes. Okay. So there is not a current plan. It's something we would be interested in talking about. We have enjoyed well more success than we thought we would and expected with our business plan, and it just continues to go really well. I think expansion would be a really great thing for us to be thinking, smart thing for us to be thinking about, but as of yet, we've not had those conversations, so thank you.
And Director Hartman about the matching funds.
Thank you, Chair Anderson and Regent Hsu. I'll give kind of the quick synopsis of an update on this. I'm proud to say we just recently finished the feasibility study to the $4 million match, and I'm happy to say the $4 million match occurred through the legislature of the state of Minnesota. And so the University of Minnesota Foundation and members of the University of Minnesota Duluth staff are now strategizing to kind of give more of a kickoff now to actually start the fundraising now that the feasibility study is done.
Okay, thank you.
Regent Kenyana.
Thank you very much, Chair Anderson. Thank you, presenters, for taking time and sharing about these two museums with us. I'd be remiss not to point out that Director Hartman and I are both President Emeriti of the UMD Student Association. So just fun little connection there. This summer at our retreat, we spent a lot of time talking about outreach, and we all had different ideas, not competing, but certainly different ideas of what that is. And one of our priorities is to clearly define, articulate, and promote the university's outreach mission and develop a system-wide plan to guide and measure its impact. And these entities both fit in that so well. If we could go to slide 123 real quick. No, do you have control? I'm sorry.
What's it look like?
Well, it's the picture of the people at the planetarium. Looking up at the planetarium.
That's it.
Right there. I mean, that looks like the outreach mission to me, honestly. Being able to bring people in from the community, and then the picture at Glen Sheen with all the people in the crowd. But I just wanted to point out how I think this fits in our outreach mission, and it's certainly an opportunity to bring people in for what the entities are, but then go on to tell the story of the other things we're doing in our teaching and in our research mission. And I think that just speaks to how good our staff and committee leadership is at putting this stuff together to align with our plan. But thank you for your time and for the presentation.
Thank you. And that is an interesting fact about the both the President Emeriti of the student union, group up there. Can I ask you what you're, Director Hartman?
Chair Anderson, absolutely. I was student body president 2003, 2004.
Terrific. Thank you. Regent Powell.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. Both of these are really stunning outreach successes, so congratulations to both of you. And Regent Beeson asked the question on finances, so I'm going to yield.
Regent Rocha, you want to take us home here, and we'll get to the consent agenda.
Sure, Mr. Chair, thank you. And I want to thank the provost for setting this up, although I would point out that you put two of the crown jewels in our outreach mission in front of us. So it's obviously a positive step to talk about these, along with the Arboretum. I mean, these are really critically important. And Director Young, I mean, congratulations on an amazing rollout and again, success beyond our expectations. And our expectations were significant. And for Director Hartman, it's nice to be able to talk about Glen Sheen in those glowing terms, because it wasn't that long ago that, not long ago at all, that we were talking about the capacity for it to continue to help us in our outreach mission and how we were going to take care of this. And with your robust numbers, I would suggest that you're dangerously close to being tapped to come down to our athletic department and ticket sales to see if we assign you to TCF perhaps, but maybe that'll be Regent Kenyanya if it's that student body UMD president magic. We'll set him to that assignment. But one quick question, and I think the Bell Museum has this in tremendous form. We, putting on my John Q. Public hat, we just did a trip out to Mount Rushmore, and where some of the historic portions of it were maybe not of great interest to our 10, 8, and now 6-year-old kids. They had a program for a junior ranger thing, and set the kids out on that, and they got really engaged. Do you have programs at Glen Sheen to sort of make it come alive for youth like that? Because obviously these will be lifetime memories that they'll have of that attraction, and I'm just wondering whether we have something already in place and what could be developed in that regard for Glen Sheen.
Director Hartman.
Chair Anderson and Regent, absolutely, and we're continuing to look for more ways to do this. So the most successful thing, honestly, probably worth about 15 to 20,000 of our visitor bump a couple years ago, is we invented this thing called the Treasure Book. And the Treasure Book identifies 2 items in each room where the kids have like an I Spy game in each of the rooms of the mansion. And then when they see the item, it then tells them the history of that item. And so it's kind of funny because I'll be honest, for a while, a lot of kids didn't enjoy the place. And so the parents would kind of drag their kids through. And now the opposite problems occurred where the kids want to find every single item and mom and dad want to get out of the house. And so I just think it's been kind of fun to see how that curve has changed. We also do little, you can call them gimmicks, but in October we'll hide pumpkins through the house as well as part of that way to keep kids entertained. I have 4 kids under 8. And so I will say they are probably my inspiration for ideas at times. But 100%, when the whole family enjoys the museum experience, they're going to come back and they're going to learn a lot more through that process as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you both of you for being here, and thank you for what you do every day for the people of the state of Minnesota. So thank you very much. We're going to get now to the consent report, the consent agenda. I just happened to look and I had it on here on what is on there. We're going to have a request for approval of new academic programs. We heard today how they are vetted. We're going to have a request for approval of changed academic programs, a request for approval of discontinued academic programs, and a request for conferral of tenure for outside hires. In just a moment, I'll ask Provost Hanson to go into more detail on that, but before I do, could I get a motion and second for that?
So moved. Second.
Second, okay. Provost Hanson, anything you want to explain about that vote?
Thank you, Chair Anderson, and I know we're in a hurry, so I'll just highlight a couple of things. On the new programs, the School of Public Health is creating a post-baccalaureate certificate in American Indian Public Health and Wellness. And the Carlson School is creating an undergraduate minor in strategic management, and that's going to be useful to a lot of students who aren't in the Carlson School because it can be added to other majors. One thing I also want to highlight is a new partnership between South Dakota State University and the College of Veterinary Medicine on the Twin Cities campus. A transfer agreement is being formalized that will allow up to 20 students per cohort to transfer into the DVM degree program upon completion of a master's degree from SDSU. The program addresses a regional need for veterinarians who provide services for large animals, cattle, swine, and horses in rural areas, and that is, there's a lot of demand for the vet school, but not always a lot of demand for those large animal vets. There's demand for it, but there's not often a lot of students coming in, so it's important to have that rural connection. The program does align with pathways for students transferring from other veterinary medicine programs, and it's not going to displace other students seeking traditional admission, because what we're swapping out is something that was a pathway coming from for Caribbean students to our vet school. So just want to mention that. And then, it's very important, the degree conferral for 7 recent hires. Those are tenure conferrals. They're people who've been hired in. So the brief bios are in your materials.
Thank you, Provost Hanson. Any questions from my region colleagues on the consent agenda? If not, there's a motion second on the table. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Provost Hanson, do you have any information items for us that you want to talk about? No. Okay, so don't leave yet. I do have a notice from Regent Powell here that from our chairman. It says, this is to the colleagues. I'd like to remind my colleagues that immediately following our meeting, we will be heading out for lunch and an interactive learning opportunity. We're going to be boarding a bus, I told you, and going to the cancer and cardiovascular research building to learn about mapping of the zebra mussel genome for researchers from the Genomics Center and the Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center. Please take a short break if you need one. And Regent Sviggum, we did conclude 7 minutes early. Then head to the first floor to meet the bus at Oak Street entrance to the building. If you have questions, please ask the board staff. With that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.